Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Historic Preservation Commission. It is Thursday, October 25th, 2018, and this meeting has been advertised in the Montclair Times, the Newark Star Ledger, and it's also been posted on in City Hall. So, without further ado, Mr. Petto, could you please?
Chair Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Heineman is excused this evening. Mr. Greenbaum?
Here.
Mr. Rooney?
Here.
Ms. Kane-Levy?
Here.
Mr. Reimnitz?
Here.
And Ms. Gillette is excused this evening. Mr. Connolly?
Here.
And Mr. Angelo will be joining us later this evening.
Yes, Mr. Angelo said he would try to get here by 8:30. The approval of minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? I'd just like to make one. I was not here at the September 27th meeting, so you need to take my name off. Any other comments or changes? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just Mr. Greenbaum and Ms. Kane-Levy and Mr. Rooney on the minutes.
No comments.
No comments. So,
So one of them has to make the motion then.
right. Have the motion to accept the minutes as written with the
changes.
And second?
Second.
And all in favor, Mr. Reimnitz and I will abstain. So the three of
All
you.
in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. So we are going to start with our agenda with the committee reports. The first committee, Education and Outreach. Mr. Rooney.
Have I
What have
done
you done?
anything?
Right. I have an idea. For the 150th anniversary,
Yeah.
I got a list of buildings that have been in Montclair for 150 years or older. Graham and Mr. Karasik sent me a list. And I do know that each board is being photographed as a publicity, I guess, advertisement, publicity for their work in the township. So my idea was to get a foam core, piece of foam core, as large as I could, get it, I don't know, 4 by 2, not too large, and then put pictures of the buildings around it, and then have some wording in the center, something like Montclair Historic Preservation Commission, preserving our heritage together, and then we could all stand around it at the next meeting and take a picture.
That works for me.
Sure. Okay. So what about the wording? Preserving our heritage. Should we say together or leave out together?
No, we can use it together.
Okay. So preserving our heritage together. All right. So I'll put that together for next meeting in November. And then I was really excited to report that Chris Matthews, a professor of archaeology from MSU, called me today, and he has a project with his students. He had done an oral history project on Pine Street and the Italian immigrants on Pine Street, and he'd like to work with us as using our knowledge and our take on the architectural heritage of Pine Street to do some with his students at Montclair State for a course that he's doing in the spring. So I was going to meet with him next week and then he's going to put together a proposal, and I can come back and let you know what's going on with that. So we'll get some good publicity from that as well. Besides helping Pine Street and the transition from Italian American to an African American center community as it is now. So that's what I have to report from Education and Outreach. How about minor applications?
I did meet with Graham, and you'll have to remind me the applications that we dealt with. The one I remember was on Glen Ridge Avenue, a projecting sign.
Yes, Sperling Dermatology we did, 2B Pilates, which is going to be located on South Park Street, a new business. Cafe in Upper Montclair, it used to be a shake place, smoothie place, that's becoming Joyous Cafe. There were 5 of them in total.
Oh, you have 5. Oh. That was a lot. Did you meet one day, you did 5, or?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And nominations. As part of the nominations committee, our grant that Mr. McCabe is writing for the extension, the westward extension of Bloomfield Avenue, he will have the first draft next week.
Okay.
And then we will, hopefully, Graham will keep us under control in terms of time and procedure, because after we get that, we'll have to review it, and then there's a certain procedure for it to be approved by.
Yeah, so upon receipt of the draft, I'll convene a meeting of the nominations committee, which is Ms. Bennett and Mr. Rooney, and we'll conduct a review of the initial draft to see if it's, what we expected. Then we'll publish it for notice, hopefully in time for our November meeting. The publication requirement is 20 days prior to the November meeting, which would be November 9th. And then we'll hold the public hearing at that time to review the draft and make a recommendation on it moving forward through the nomination process.
So the public hearing would be on November 9th?
November 29th. November 9th is the date that it has to be released as noticed.
Right. And then the 29th, is that?
The 29th, that's our next meeting.
That's our next meeting, so it'll be
meeting in November.
incorporated into our meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Design review. You were just upstairs?
That was with the parking garage.
Right.
And we're down to a few details, of which they are going to send them over digitally. So I don't need to bring that whole big set again.
Okay.
And we're actually having a on-site meeting Thursday, November 1st at 8 a.m. at the site
Okay.
to talk about material selections.
Oh, okay. Has that been resolved, the stucco choice?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's just now he's got some final things he has to do. He apparently had made some agreements via email, but they didn't show up in time for the drawings.
Oh.
So now he's just going to send me
Okay.
some details.
Well, for our next meeting then, can you bring will you have a finalized image?
It hasn't really changed that much. We're just looking at the details inside the walls.
Oh, inside the walls.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. And I can't read my handwriting over here. Oh, revisions. Did we already talk about revisions committee?
Did we
We have
update?
it-
The last go around with the revisions committee was 220 Bloomfield.
Yeah, I can't recall if that was before or after our last meeting.
Yeah, I think it was maybe before the last meeting, which I didn't attend, so
What
there's
can
no report per se.
have they started the work?
They're
That's a
still
terracotta.
finalizing their building permit process.
Oh, oh. Do you think it'll be finalized before the bad weather?
I'm not exactly sure. Depends on
Okay.
subcode review. So
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
once
that
I'll once work is started, I'll definitely.
Yeah, could you let us
know.
all know, Graham, so we can really make a record of it? Okay. And then can you fill us in on the update on the grant for the redevelopment, Mary Krugman's grant, the redevelopment?
Oh yes,
and
so
the,
we've received a draft of Ms. Krugman's initial report on the redevelopment analysis and historic preservation. So my recommendation would be that that the commission convene a subcommittee to review the draft, and then similar to our plan for the westward expansion, we can discuss it at our November meeting. So in advance of that, we have a committee kind of take a look, can work iteratively with Ms. Krugman to make any edits or changes to the document, and then we'll distribute it for the full commission to see at the November meeting. So that would be my recommendation, to
Great.
have a committee do that review.
Right. So we're going to form another committee. Any volunteers? Any takers?
Well, since you and I will be reading something anyway, we might
Okay.
as well
Okay,
take
great.
that one over. If we could have it the same day.
Yeah, well, that I actually already have, so I can get that out to you
Oh,
both
okay.
tomorrow.
Great.
So you can at least read one first.
Right.
Okay, so we're moving along with that. And just as a reminder, all these, in terms of time, everything has to be completed for the 2 grants by December 31st. So
Right.
we really need to,
Turn these things around quickly.
exactly. Okay, So, the next thing on the agenda is HPC certification of appropriateness, application 2018-44, the Montclair Cafe at 202 Bellevue Avenue. Is anyone here to speak to that?
Yes.
Great.
Hi, good evening.
Well, you could
My
say,
name is-
yeah, you can use the easel.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Serdar Keyman, and I'm the architect of record for the 202. Yeah, 202 Bellevue Avenue, and it's in the corner of the.
Well, before you begin, I think
Yeah.
I have to swear you in. So if you just raise your right hand,
Yeah.
and I do swear to tell the truth, the whole truth.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And identify yourself, please.
Serdar Keyman.
Yes.
I'm
And,
with SK2 Architects. I'm the architect of record.
okay. Great.
So,
I'm sorry, could you repeat your name again?
Serdar Keyman.
Cayman. Okay.
Yes.
Is your microphone
Welcome.
on? Is there a line?
Yes, it is.
So, before you begin, this is a certificate of appropriateness, an installation of a new window, removal of the old awning, replacement of the awning, installation of new signage, and there's also a new window to be installed on the south facade.
Yes, correct.
Yes. And you're here before us because this building is in the Upper Montclair Historic District.
Yes.
Okay. So if you could walk us through and tell us what you plan to do?
Okay, so let me start with the building. It's Bellevue Avenue and Northview Avenue. It's the corner lot. And this building, we are trying to open a coffee shop at the rear side of the building. The entrance is at the Northview Avenue side. And we are proposing to replace the awning. So the photograph that you see at the bottom is the existing. That's the proposed. And we will keep the structure for the awning and replace the fabric with, I have the sample over here, with this color, a blue color, and also paint the doors, windows at the Northview Avenue side, and remove the awnings that are on the smaller windows at the Northview Avenue side as well, and then propose a window at the rear side. And we will also provide the name of the coffee shop, which you see Montclair Coffee, and owner decided to change the name to Eagle Rock. So
Oh, so what will it be now?
Eagle Rock.
Eagle Rock Cafe?
Yes. That's the name. So as you see over here, Montclair, it says Montclair Cafe, but we want to provide the sign Eagle Rock.
Okay.
Put in the new window.
And we are also proposing two outside lighting over here, and then at the project you see the photo of the light at the if you refer to A000.
Where's that? Right.
I think I covered everything,
Mhm.
and we are hoping an approval from you for these proposed changes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Any comments?
My only comment is, I thought you did a very thorough job of putting all the elements together and showing us. We see a lot of things that are half-baked, and this was fairly clear, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Rooney, do you have any comments?
Other than misspellings, no. But
I'm sorry about that.
it's sconce lighting, not scone lighting. That's it.
Oh, so I just have a question. The
Yeah, sure.
blue on the windows, you're just doing that on the side that faces Northview?
Yes.
Okay, and you're not going to do anything on the back?
No. We are
And-
not planning on doing, I mean,
Well, I guess it isolates the windows. Is that a, is there a window on the Bellevue Avenue side?
no, the actually building continues, if you look at the site plan,
Right,
the hashed area is the proposed coffee shop area.
Right.
And then we have a one-story frame at the Bellevue Avenue side. You can see it from here.
Right.
It goes maybe 30, 40
Yeah,
feet.
see, it's
Right,
this thing.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's 30 feet.
okay. And are you planning to replace the railing or just to paint it?
I think we cannot paint that, so we have to replace that if we are gonna do a blue, because it's a plastic railing.
Right.
But if,
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
yes, so, but.
So
we-
you'll
we can
replace it
keep-
with wood? You'll replace it with a wood
I
railing
think
that's painted,
Same kind of material,
plastic?
yes.
Well, how are you going to get the same color?
I mean, we will try our best to get the same color, or the client told me that before the meeting that maybe we can keep the handrail, because we realize that, you know, it will be a little bit costly to replace, so we can keep it.
So you would keep it, the
Yes,
white plastic?
keep it, yeah.
Well, my comment would be if you're going to replace it with wood, you'll never get a plastic to be the same color.
Right. Wood or aluminum.
But eventually, you know, in the future, maybe if we decide to replace, we will come back to the board again.
Okay. And then, does this signage then go before,
So because it's presented here as part of the CFA, you guys can approve it now, or if you'd like them to come back for another minor application, you can do that, or you can approve the signage.
well, another question, if it's going to be Eagle Rock Cafe, you have a rectangular board with Montclair Cafe that fits on it. So now are you going to go rectangular?
No, we don't want to change the size, but we will fit the writing in the same measurement, 6 inches high and 4 feet 6 inches at the awning, and smaller letter is smaller sign by the door. That will be 3 inches high letters.
Are you going to, is Eagle Rock, will it be Eagle Rock Cafe?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, so the board will not be any larger than 1 foot 8 inches, 20 inches.
Yes.
It'll be 20 inches.
Yes. 20 inches. We are not going to change the size of the signage.
Okay.
We are just going to change the name of the cafe only.
And it'll be the same font.
Yes.
Okay.
Who belongs to the garbage cans and stuff that I see
I think
sitting?
that's the owner.
Is
So
that a
they
di-
are.
Is that a different operation than the?
Yes.
Okay.
And the coffee shop is not open yet, so there are some minor construction inside. But
That's what
I
the
can.
That's what the dumpster is for there.
No, I don't think so. Right now? But not in the photos.
There's a dumpster to the right of
Oh,
the
yeah.
basement hatch, yeah.
So
Right.
that's for the other tenants. But, you know, we can suggest them to put
Okay,
that
okay.
dumpster to the garage, you know. I think garage is empty.
So to get back to the sign, that's a piece of wood, that's stained wood?
Yes.
And then how are the letters, what are the letters made from?
It's metal letters, as you see at the
Right,
bottom. Single individual letters will be mounted on the wood backing that is flush, recessed 1 inches from the wall, right
And-
next to the door.
And the sign itself, is it just there's no, there's no framing around the board?
No,
Okay, so you want it to look very,
modern.
right.
But it looks like you've got a frame of paint. You know, there's a frame around it, and it looks like in his drawing here, it might be the same color as the letters.
Oh. Yeah, do you see that? That's a good point.
You did it, the frame is painted?
There's a border.
There's a border, it's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, but I wasn't thinking to put a border.
So,
Just planning on putting the wood and then mounting the ladders at the top of the wood.
Okay.
so the sign will be 20 inches wide by 24 inches high,
Yes,
plain wood, stained
yes,
on the edges,
yes, of
and
course.
with metal lettering that will be...
3 inches.
How, 3 inches?
3 inches,
3 inches high. And it'll be 3 lines.
yes.
Okay.
And then the other sign, and maybe you didn't notice, that is on the awning, on the face of the awning,
Right.
that is 4 feet 6 width and 6 inches high as well.
And does that comply with our,
Yeah, 6 inches is the maximum type.
and how about the length?
There is no length.
Oh, okay.
with requirement.
There is a square footage calculations, but we are way below the
Yeah.
Okay.
calculation.
Yeah, that's correct.
Are you going to, is that, what type of font is that? Is that the same, are you going to do it as a branding font or as a,
I think it's gonna be the font that you see in this drawing.
Okay.
okay. And the wall sconce, how far does that project?
Project,
Yeah.
probably 4 inches.
Oh, so you don't see any, nobody will hit their head on that? When they go
We
down.
will make sure that we mount it at the, there's
Height?
actually an existing one. If you look at the photo,
Oh, you can't even see it.
it's over
Oh,
here,
it's
actually,
this
there's an
one.
existing one.
Right.
We are gonna remove that one and then put 2 of those, in
Okay.
one each side of the door.
Any other questions?
Looks fine.
So,
So this is a C of A, so I guess if Mr. Connolly had any comments. you want to-
No
Right.
comments.
no, I
There
didn't
were
see
no
any
comments.
comments.
So any conditions that you'd like to impose on the applicant? And then this is a C of A, so you'll make a motion and vote on the application.
Okay. Well, the one thing would be the sign, which would remain the same size, 20 inches wide by 24 inches high, without a border, so you wouldn't paint a
Okay.
border, with the metal letters in 3 lines,
Mhm.
3 inches high, mounted to,
The side of the door,
Right.
left side of the door.
right. And then the railing, being that it's not to replace it with a plastic railing, and if you do replace it, it should be wood,
Mhm.
and you should use the same color as the surround of the windows.
Okay.
Are there any other? And we just had some suggestions about the garbage that's
Okay.
Yeah, the planning board would want them to hide the garbage if that's their garbage.
right. And then, are you gonna, and what would be nice as a suggestion would maybe be to add a little bit more to that landscape?
Of course, that's what we are planning on doing.
Okay. All right, great.
Okay.
So I think it looks like a nice, great addition to Upper Montclair.
Thank you.
Make
Thank
a
you.
There needs to be a
motion-
motion.
Oh, sorry.
Make a motion to approve with the
Conditions?
amendments?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay, next up is referral from the Board of Adjustment, application 2567, 37 North Mountain Avenue, better known as the Georgian Inn, Montclair Town Center LLC. This is an amended site plan approval. This is listed as an individual historic landmark, and the materials were previously distributed to all the commissioners. Does everyone have the packet? Well,
They were sent in the August packet. If you need, I have extra copies.
That would be
Good. I have no idea where it is. Right, right.
Yeah, do you have,
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, we need those. Are we all set with our materials? I think so. Okay, hi. Good evening, everybody. You've already been, do we have to
This
swear
is
them?
the first appearance here, so I'll be sworn in.
I'm sorry.
You'll have to swear them in. It's their first appearance here.
Okay, so, do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right, could
Stephen
you,
Plofker, 16 Irwin Park Road, Montclair.
and your association with the project?
I am the owner of the LLC that
Okay.
owns the project.
And Kevin Costello, director of the ownership entity.
Okay, so, do you want to, do you have any pictures, or we're going to look at the plans?
No, we're going to look at the plans. We didn't bring any additional materials.
Okay,
We modified some of the features on the exterior of the building during the construction process, and have applied for amended site plan approval, which is why we're here. They referred the matter back to the HPC.
great. So, do you want to go over, should we,
Yep, we're here to answer questions more than anything else, whatever you'd like. We don't really have a formal presentation.
okay, so, Mr. Conley, then, maybe you could start with your comments.
Well, could you explain the modifications that were made?
Right.
We altered the design of the railing at the main entrance. Although I don't think it's a modification, but the windows are now black.
Okay.
We proposed originally a wooden trellis below the front windows, and we did some mock-ups of this in the field, and I just didn't like the way it looked. So we bricked that area in, and we could still add a trellis detail to that, but I wouldn't be in favor of that. I just really was not, I didn't like the way that it ended up looking in reality. We proposed eliminating the canopy on the rear entry door. It was a glass canopy that having seen a lot of glass canopies, they're always dirty, and the day you put them in is the best day of its life, and so we proposed eliminating that. A flat steel door for the rear entry exit rather than a panel door, and increased glazing in the front entry door.
There was some, we talked about it with the subcommittee in the field, there's some minor landscape modifications too, just quantities and sizes were altered at the suggestion of our landscape contractor. There was just an excessive amount of landscaping shown on plan, and the size kind of listed in the plant schedule didn't really match what would fit in the planting beds. So some of those were minor adjustments made to those, which are reflected on this plan.
So, yeah, are there photographs of, no, it's just this packet that, it's just this packet that we got. We don't have the colored renderings from the previous, okay. So just what, the steel, glass canopy, you're replacing that now with the steel canopy. You're not, you're removing it and replacing it with a steel. It shows the steel canopy.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and then,
No, we definitely took.
what else?
You know, it's very awkward to clean a glass canopy, and it's just, there's just no good way to keep it clean in my experience, and so
Right.
similar shape and size, just different materials.
Right. Is that up already? then?
No, it's not.
Okay. Are there any other changes that, I know Mr. Conley has a list of project comments. Are there anything?
We can
Before
review
we-
his list of comments if you'd
Right.
like.
Well, I
yes.
should be clear, those comments were generated by, I guess, our review, I believe. Kevin, you were at that meeting, right?
Yeah, we kind of walked around. I think we went over
So,
this.
We discussed a few things that we thought, I guess, with our subcommittee.
Yeah, I think.
And what was the
addressed.
date of that? That was in August, correct?
August 10th.
Okay.
Should we review those comments?
Sure.
Okay. The spot repointing is done. That's project comment A. Remove the brick infill at the dovecoats at the gable end. Either recess the brick or infill with wood, which should also be recessed. We won't be doing that. We've already bricked it in flush with it. Had this been a requirement prior to us doing the work, we would have done it, but I have no intention of removing a brick.
But they were there historically, right? That was an architectural feature of the building.
Had you made the report prior to the construction, it would have been fine with me, but afterward, I'm not doing it. I don't consider it a
They're not shown
significant
on the
feat.
drawings.
I'm sorry?
They're not referenced on the drawing at all. Right, there were, some people call them pigeonnaires or
Okay.
dovecotes.
There's a
right?
lot
They
of
were-
things that,
whole bunch
in
of-
the course of
Well,
construction.
that's the thing, I'm,
Excuse me. If you want to keep interrupting me, that's fine, but why don't you go ahead and say everything you want to say, then let me talk.
this application for myself is hard to review because I came in prior to the start of the project. So my review was generated through the comments of the subcommittee on site. So what we've all decided during that subcommittee meeting, along with Kevin, were these things that are mentioned in my memo. And they were agreed to on site.
No, I wouldn't say these items were agreed. I, like, especially this item and the item with the trellis under the front windows. I mean, I was clear that I knew our principal was against what we had talked about. I knew you guys held that opinion.
Well, that was never mentioned on site. We discussed these things. Yes.
Right, these items were discussed, but I thought you were implying that I agreed to these, to do these items on site. I don't think that was the case at all.
That was our understanding, or my
We
understanding
thought,
at
we
least.
thought you were amenable to
Well, look,
doing
guys,
this.
I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. They're
What?
already filled in with brick.
What-
I
what-
think they look fine. You might not think they don't, you might think they don't look fine. However, make
Right.
that comment prior to me doing the work, not afterward.
Originally, this was, there were barn doors there?
We're talking
two
about,
different things right now.
underneath the gable, there were
Oh, no, I'm-
openings.
I'm at the doors.
I don't know what it was, and the
This area.
ventilation, I don't know if it was vent, I don't even know what was up there.
Yeah, they weren't infilled or anything.
And
No, it
don't
was-
forget, this building had a fire any number of years ago,
Yeah.
and a lot of the things such as this had been damaged, either in the fire or in the move of the building.
Right.
And, listen, I would not have objected to the comment had we not already done the work, and
Was
had you
it-
made the comment in a timely manner. After I've done the work, no, and good luck getting me to do it, is all I'm gonna say.
Is that what these things are?
Now, let's keep going.
Yes.
Well,
Remove
was that
further-
part of the original
Referral.
proposal? Was that, I came to this late as well, but was there any indication that you were going to be filling in an architectural feature when this initially came forward? Or this was
I don't
like a
think there was
decision made in the field
any
without?
mention of it either way. I mean, there was pictures and renderings submitted.
There-
But in those-
The building's been beat up, there's been any number of subcommittee meetings on the site.
All right.
The first time we've heard of this is in this meeting that Kevin had, followed by this memorandum. And as far as I'm concerned, it's too late. I am not going to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to recess a brick in that area.
Okay, well, you've made your point, but I think what Ms. Kane-Levy has said, that originally they were open, and you didn't indicate that you were going to close them. So when we were there on site looking at it, we saw that they were closed. That's our point.
We didn't indicate that they were going to be open. May have been an oversight on both of our parts. I will accept that. However, they're closed. They're infilled with appropriate brick and appropriate pointing, and had it been an important item for the board, you've got to bring it to our attention at an appropriate time, and I don't think now is the appropriate time.
Well, it's
In
shown
my
on the
opinion.
drawings.
Hmm?
It's shown on the drawings. You can see the outlines where the...
Is there any note on it?
There's no note on it, but you can see where they were.
I mean, honestly, we do. I'm sorry, but we make decisions all the time in the field about things that are not noted either way.
Right.
But it's a significant architectural feature to this style, to a carriage house. So
Says-
it's been-
I don't know.
for a carriage house of a Dutch colonial revival, they are significant.
Well, I guess they brought you on a little too late then. It didn't seem
Well,
to
I
be in
mean-
anybody's attention.
I don't think there was any indication that it was planned to be closed.
There was
in
no
any of these
indication it
drawings.
wasn't planned to be closed.
But it's shown on the drawings as being there.
Yeah, but it's out, I mean, you can still see on site, it's not like we fingered in the brick. I mean, you can still see the outline of the
Okay.
original open,
But
you know what I
can
mean? So
hammer
they'd be
away
there.
as much as you want on this. I'm not going to do it. Okay, you had your time to comment to make this an important feature to you. The building was there. We beat this up for months in subcommittees. All somebody had to say before we did the work was, oh, what are you doing, or why don't you do it this way? Didn't do that. You
You
didn't
could
do
have
that.
also
You can
cut-
say,
You could have said,
I
"We're going
should
to
have
fill it
said,
in."
I should have known, I should have, I could have, a lot of things.
You could have
did,
told- you
excuse
could
me.
have
You
alerted-
did,
You
what?
could have alerted someone that you were going to close them up.
Guys, I don't alert you about hundreds of things I do because I can't read your brain what's important to you. I don't know. If you don't tell me, I don't know.
If you closed up a window, you'd let us know. This is like another window.
Had not even the inkling that this was an important consideration. Had no reason to think this was an important consideration. And if it was important, you had every opportunity just to tell it was important.
Well, we did tell you in August, when we had our meeting on August 10th, after the work was done.
It was already
But
done.
This is it.
Guys, beat this up as much as you want. I don't know, I don't care.
I'll ask a question. If you had known this was important, it wouldn't have made much of a difference to you. You could have recessed that.
Oh,
If you had
easily.
known. Easily.
I could have put wood, I could have put recessed, I could have done anything, and I would be willing to do it, as you know I am willing to do it. But for you to tell me at the late date that, oh, it's important to us, but I should have known it was important to you even though you didn't tell me it was important to you, well, I don't know what to do with that information, other than to tell you I'm not going to spend the money to recess this a couple inches.
Is there any way that you can differentiate?
If you can think of a way that doesn't cost me extreme expense, be my guest.
I mean,
I will consider
the
it.
brick is not a perfect match, so, you know, you can,
Well,
it's,
that's a help.
I mean, it is. I mean, it's obvious where it is. You know, the brick looks very similar on the addition, but when you see it right infilled there, it's, I mean, on site, you can see where they are. You know, they don't get lost in it.
I
But
guess,
short of
I guess
painting
could-
them or something, I don't know what.
could faux paint
wouldn't-
louvers or something, but guys,
No.
I mean,
No, you've
Nice.
made it clear but we were there on August 10th, and we did mention it, so
yes,
it's after.
was it done or not on August 10th?
It was done.
So what?
You've made it clear, this is an advisory commission, and that's what our advice is. So
Okay.
we'll move on. You've made it clear that you're not
I
going to change
think
it.
at our initial application, we thought that it was evident that they'd be filled in because it's occupied space up there. Of course, we had to fill it in with something. And so we would have thought if there was an issue with the infill, that would have been brought up.
Okay.
Are we ready to move on?
Moving on to number C.
Remove brick infill below new windows. The former carriage house door openings with wood cross panels as originally proposed. That's these two.
And Mr. Conley, maybe you could give your reasons for that recommendation.
Yeah, the
that's-
original, is this what you describe as the trellis below the windows in the front?
That's what he was referring to.
Oh,
yes.
okay. Well, originally you had proposed a wood infill for the original barn doors, yes? So the problem I have with that is it doesn't make a clear distinction between the materials that were there originally and what's infilled now. It's confusing to somebody that there was you need to differentiate the materials that you're putting into when you change a building. We're trying to comply with the Secretary of Interior standards when you work in a historic building. So to try and differentiate between what was original opening as a barn door.
I can only tell you,
So why was a change made from wood, which was originally proposed, to brick, which is harder to read as a
because I put
original
wood in
opening?
there and I thought it looked terrible. And I tried putting the lattice work or whatever it was, I tried it both in wood and metal. I did mock-ups of it and I just thought it looked terrible. I really, and you don't have to take my word for it, but.
The brick
and
is it match the addition?
Pardon?
Is it differentiate in color?
You know, it's
brick,
it's a
yeah.
masonry facade.
Yeah.
There's not 1 inch of the facade that's not masonry other than windows.
But
And
I'm saying-
I really, guys,
No, the question
I really, I hear you, and yes, that's why we're here, because I deviated from the plans.
Right.
I put wood in there. It just bothered me.
No, I
And,
understand that.
and you can look at any of my buildings, critique any one of them, but I'm gonna tell you that that's the work I do. And you can look at the inn next door, you can look at any of the other buildings I've done in town. And at some point, I could not live with the way that looked. Like a wood panel below there, no matter what I did to it, looked terrible to me, and just to me, and so I bricked it up. Now, we can always recreate that trellis beneath it, but I had to make the decision at the time, do I leave a wood panel underneath there with decoration on it, or do I fill the brick in, and then if I'm forced to do the trellis later. And I just decided that, I had to fill it in if I was gonna fill it in. And
My
so
question
we
is,
can recreate that
What kind of
detail.
brick did you use?
So we used the same brick as the addition, but
So
we
there
gave
is
it
a
some
difference.
relief, so it's inset from the face. So there's still,
Fine, and so it is a different match than the existing.
Yeah.
So we can tell that it's different.
yeah, and we, like I said, with the relief and with this detail, this kind of picture frame detail we did around it, we weren't trying to hide that those openings had once existed.
Right.
Mr. Sionis, when he had designed the X pattern there, I don't think he was, I mean, his testimony was not that he was trying to recreate the barn door that had originally been there, but he was referencing this historic photo he had seen of the inn, that the old porch had these X's, I guess, above the porch. None of that exists on the inn anymore, so he's kind of referencing something that didn't exist anymore. It seemed to kind of be lost a little bit on its own.
It seemed, what's the word, random. It just seemed like,
If you had seen this historic picture, you might have known what it, but since there's no point of reference on site for that anymore, it seemed a little bit random.
it really did. It just seemed like out of place to me. Like, what's the point of that? Like, where's that coming from? What's the, you know?
So we make these recommendations, we follow the Secretary of Interior standards, and that's what we judge what people do, propose for buildings. So I think what Mr. Rooney is getting at is that if the brick is a different match from the total, the original, it stands out enough that
You can tell there was an opening.
you can
there.
tell that there was a different type of opening there. So and that's according to the Secretary of Interior standards.
Well,
So-
it's been there for, any number of months, so you would be the judge of whether it's enough difference in both
Right.
recess and in material to, I'm not going to attempt to be the judge. I think it looks pretty good. You can tell that it's infilled, and I think it looks a lot better than what was designed, and that's why we did it. And by the way, we can have a subcommittee come, I can do some mock-up of some, embellishment on top of that, but I don't think it looks good. I think it looks pretty good the way it is, but.
Do we want any more discussion on that aspect of the building, underneath the front windows? Okay. D.
This is an item that, in our understanding, that the leaders that have been installed were approved by the subcommittee.
So this is memorialized in one of Graham's
Prior.
memos from, well over a year ago, but that was, when we'd meet with the subcommittee regularly, we'd have a number of items we'd go through and kind of check off columns and sills and keystones and all those things. We provided a copper downspout sample, which was approved, and so that's what we installed. But I think the report, coming into it late, I don't think you would know, but that's, if we look through those old memos, I believe that's been memorialized already.
These are round, correct me, Kev, but are they round
Copper.
true copper leaders?
So I think smooth round leaders, that's what we have, right?
I don't know. I don't know if they're
Yeah,
installed
so it's
over
just,
there on
I think
site.
what the
Yeah,
comment
just
is.
for clarification on that, the leaders were not installed when we did the site visit in August. I think that was,
Oh, I didn't
that was
know that.
part of the
Oh,
comment.
so we have smooth round
Okay,
leaders on
then
there.
that's
They just
fine.
don't have this cast iron sleeve with brass cleanouts. That wasn't part of the, they matched the in ones, which were approved by the subcommittee.
They actually look pretty good.
Thank you.
I have a picture of
Did you take those
I
pictures?
took that picture today.
Oh.
Is that the front windows?
Do you
too?
have other pictures as well?
Do you have any other that?
No, that was it. I was just looking at the area underneath the window, and that was it.
Thank you. The next one, E, applicant needs to provide lighting proposed for installation.
Agreed, and we will do. I'm just struggling with finding appropriate lights. I mean, sort of either antique or new. I'm really struggling with enough size and heft of these lights.
I think we did a really good job with the site lights in kind of, it's a contemporary light that at least, looks enough has historic elements to it, and that's kind of, we're looking for a similar one. The sconce version of that light is just like enormous. It's the same light head as the one that's on the pole lights, which the scale is all wrong with it. So we've been struggling a little bit.
We haven't put as much attention into this as we should, but we fully intend to bring it to the subcommittee
Okay.
for
Prior to
take a look at
install.
Right.
this.
So which subcommittee is that will be?
The final selection of the lights would be the revisions committee.
Okay, so that'll be revisions committee. Okay, and then we get to the
Just-
fencing,
but
which.
just to note, we usually just put to HPC so that we have some latitude. We usually, typically in the referrals, we just put HPC, so it doesn't necessarily have to go to the revisions committee. It could come here.
Okay.
There's a band.
And the fencing that you have finished with shellac?
Well, they're stained as opposed to painted. We just have had a lot more success over time with stained surfaces, stained fencing than we have with painted, and just in terms of maintenance. What's it supposed to? What is the white supposed to match? The other fencing and wooden elements of it.
Because
Listen, if I struggle with painting it. If I was going to paint it, I was probably going to paint it a dark gray or dark green, which I think is more appropriate
Well, I think
for the use of the building and the image of the building. It's not an important element to me. White, I don't.
well, our remarks while we were visiting was that that shellac surface was very yellow. It was a very orangey yellow.
Well, isn't
That-
some of the fencing already painted white? I think that was our problem, right? These two buildings are supposed to be companions to one another.
Do we?
I
Right,
don't think we have any white fence. We have the fence along the property line is cedar, right?
Natural, and we have a
Natural.
fence in the dumpster enclosure.
I think you guys were referencing like there's some trim around the windows that was white, and that was the There's no other fence there.
You don't have a picture because I remember
We have
that.
wrought iron railings.
I think it's all either natural or stained.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what white fencing is. The trim to the rear balcony, whatever we call it, is white, and as is the front entry. The columns and the trim work around the porch area are all white, but no, we have no white fencing.
Do you have a comment?
The only comment is it does look yellow-orange. It looks just as bad as white. Stands out just as much as if it was a white painted fence. So
Maybe,
I agree with you. If it was painted dark or if it just went away somehow. There's nothing.
Yeah,
you know.
maybe what we'll do is the next subcommittee meeting, we'll have some different samples of
Abstain?
paint or whatever we can do now. Now it's,
Right.
you know,
It's
once
hard-
you
it's
start
hard
the
now.
process, you're kind of locked in, but we'll see what is an appropriate material, and I'll have a couple different color samples to go over. I think it could be better. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Paint the foundation at the end to match the carriage house. Again, if this was an important consideration, we should have discussed it. I'm trying really to differentiate the buildings. They're entirely separate use. They share a parking lot, but that's the only thing they share. And
But
so
historically, they were together, yes, as you had the inn and a carriage house, and they were companion to one another. So by you doing that, it's not historically appropriate.
it may not be historically appropriate, but it's appropriate for me to differentiate the uses in those two buildings and not confuse my customers either of the inn or of the office building, that they are in any way related to each other in terms of use. I don't want...
What's the surface of the foundation of the Georgian Inn? I haven't been out there in a long time.
We did a hard coat, like a new hard coat.
Like a stucco. A stucco, and it's
It's like a stippled pattern.
Well, it's a little textured, but...
Yeah.
Okay.
just
And it's
over here,
a light
that's what we're
grayish,
talking about. Yeah.
like a mushroom,
It's a
right?
warm gray.
I really
Yeah,
don't have
warm.
any problems
Which
if you
one?
change the
On
windows.
the
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 end.
Medical
inn
office,
itself,
yeah.
yeah, it's like a grayish.
And we're not...
That's more of a cool
we're not
gray.
supposed to
Cool
comment
gray,
about color anyway.
Well, my memo was based on everything we discussed on site.
Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't here when this was first reviewed by the this was done a long time ago,
A long
right?
time ago.
But you were there on August 10th.
Yes, but I didn't agree to, my comments on August 10th was, I thought, to me, the fact that you guys moved this building just blows me away, and that you took the effort that you did to save this building and move it there. And I think it looks great. That was where I left it on that day, so. Oh, we did talk about painting the foundation and the fence and so on, so.
Right. So I'm just making points for our advisory memorandum to the planning board. Zoning board, sorry, excuse me. Okay, so now the colors, how are they different, the foundation colors between the inn and the medical building?
Is that reflected in that photograph you had, John?
No.
On the inn, it's a cool gray.
Yeah.
On either side of the entrance in the back. And around the new medical office building, it's a warm gray.
It's a beigeier. It's
More
a
tan, yeah.
It's warm versus
tan
cool.
beige, yeah.
And I think the foundation, as it continues under the
Right. it's
retaining
different.
wall for the, I don't know, there's a balustrade with,
There is, yeah.
it sort of changes color along the way. So there were really 3 different colors as you entered.
Well, let's
the
talk
driveway.
about that retaining wall. The balustrade, what we did, and I don't even know what year that was originally constructed along the process, along the life of this property. As opposed to recreating something that didn't exist, we painstakingly created molds for the existing pattern of the, what do we call those? Balusters, and poured them in concrete. And took a long time, but we did, and they're different. The new ones are clearly different than the old ones, and we thought of painting them to make them match, but I kind of like that you can see what's new and what's old.
I think
and
you're
that's-
talking more about the
that's
retaining
tenant.
wall, though.
And
right?
so,
Right below that.
then the wall below it, we left most of it intact, but it's clear the area that we had to repair because of very serious structural deficiencies in that.
Also, it's extended, though, because for that parking lot, remember, we had to L that.
Right, and some new construction. It never is going to match. I mean, old and new concrete never going to match. So what we did is we put a wooden trellis over that and are growing ivy slowly. I was hoping we'd make more progress this past season than we did, but it seems to be taking and slowly creeping, and I thought that would be a good solution than trying to whitewash it and make it all seem new. I like seeing the stages of construction and old and
Yes,
new, and
it's
it may
a
bother
tenant that-
some people, but
No.
it is intentional on my part. It's, if you can look at the work we've done in almost every aspect of it, I hope the one thing you can accuse, you might accuse me of either not listening or disobeying the commission, but in terms of trying to cut corners because of saving money, I hope nobody can accuse me of that. So this was more of an intentional decision that, yeah, the new and old, you can see the difference, and we tried to sort of blend it by putting that wooden trellis in front of it.
Right, and we agreed when we were there on August 10th that that was the right decision. So that I think was a good choice.
And it's also good that you left the differences between the balusters, so you know which ones were original.
Yeah, I mean, that's my style, I like to
That's
do that.
something that they talk about with the secretary standards. So,
I think what Ms. Kane-Levy was talking about is that the stucco coat didn't go down the wall, so it stops at a point. But I don't think, even with the original, when we bought it, that kind of hard coat or whatever on the lower part of the inn wasn't the same as the retaining wall. That was always a concrete retaining wall, and then they had some sort of a stucco hard coat on there. So we kind of
is
stopped
there
it
a
at a similar
trellis
point.
now covering it that wasn't there in August when we
I
visited?
think it was there. I guess I don't remember.
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't there.
Oh, the trellis was not there. Okay.
Really?
I thought it was there by August, but
Maybe that's why.
when we bought it, that wall was
No.
covered in ivy.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
You know.
yes.
So that's what we tried to do. We planted along there. We put irrigation in to grow it faster, and then we kind of matched the fences with a cedar trellis there to just kind of, they had
Oh, no, I
had.
haven't seen, is the cedar, is that a naturalized cedar, or is that did you stain it
No,
orange?
No,
we
it's
didn't
natural.
touch it.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's silver?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, we tried to get the ivy away instead of growing directly on the wall, which is can cause failure in the wall itself. We
Right.
tried to sort of get it away from it, so.
Right.
There
Yeah.
had been some sort of system, because you can see screws mounted throughout the wall. They had had some sort of system to get the ivy, probably initially, and then at some point the ivy
Right, just
outgrew
took
that.
over.
But, so we kind of, did our own system as well that matched,
Okay,
the fencing. Okay.
all right, so,
There, guys, or I would have brought a picture of that as well.
and the one thing that's not on this list is the color of the windows. So I thought our attorney would be here to tell us where you are with that currently,
Okay,
within
well,
the process of...
This is what I'm going to tell you on that. I made the decision early in the process that I wanted this building to be very distinctive from the inn. Different use. I didn't want to confuse it. I was unaware that the commission thought that they had control over colors of anything, windows, walls, anything, to be honest. And we put black windows in. The commission filed a complaint in municipal court over the colors of these windows.
Could you be clear as to who filed the complaint?
Ma'am, I don't know who filed the complaint.
What wasn't...
It's the Department of Planning and Community Development.
Okay.
It wasn't,
I
I just
assume-
want to make clear, it's not, it wasn't this commission.
Well, I assume that somebody, by buddy, I mean commission, board, person, instructed the Department of Planning to file a complaint. On our behalf, we engaged counsel and spent quite a lot of time and money preparing to defend ourselves in this municipal court matter. And there's not civil matters in municipal court. There are criminal matters in municipal court, or quasi-criminal. We reviewed all the transcripts. We transcribed, reviewed all the transcripts of all the meetings. We had counsel look at every exhibit, every agenda and resolution, both by the HPC and the Board of Adjustment. And we were very excited to try the issue of the black windows in municipal court. The prosecutor, and this is more than one court appearance, and the prosecutor looked at the case and maybe our excitement to resolve the trial, to actually try the case, and decided that he could speak for himself, but it was not a case that he wanted to try, and didn't think that that was the appropriate forum. I'm not going to discuss it further. I'm really not. You can talk as much as you want. You can say anything you want. I spent a lot of time and effort preparing for a trial in municipal court over the color of windows in a building that I am extremely proud of the way it turned out. So you can keep me here as long as you want, talking as much as you want, but I'm not going to say any more about it.
Fair enough. I just didn't know where we were in the whole process, because we have to sit here and discuss the concept, the idea of way that the two buildings relate to each other. And I think that's part of, and they are definitely, what did you call it, Mr. Conley? I forgot the style. In England, it's Queen Anne, which historically has brick and white, painted white trim.
Historically, the windows would have been white on a Dutch colonial revival building. They're historically white with green shutters on that style of architecture.
Not always. I can show you plenty of examples.
Black?
I can show you plenty, you said white. I can show you plenty of examples. Original windows that were not white, in similar styles.
Dutch Colonial Revival building.
Look it up. Had I knew that, had I had any way to know, either from meetings, notes, subcommittees, resolutions, conditions, that this was an important issue to the commission, I may have made a different decision.
Well, Mr.
However, I had no knowledge of that, and I'm not even going to entertain, I apologize for even saying that.
Mr.
I'm
Faulkner.
not going to engage any more conversation about it. You chose your forum, the forum is resolved, I'm not going to discuss it anymore.
We did see, in part of the plans of the visuals, that when the building was moved in the current location, that it had white windows. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
You chose
So,
your forum.
I'm telling you what we saw, and that's what we looked at, and that's, you know, what we, I mean, we're advisory. That's what we advise. It looked great. So I know that there's some difference of opinion on this commission as to whether or not these windows, you know, are appropriate to the style of the house. So I don't, and we are advisory. Our council isn't here yet, and we need to move on. So I think that what
I guess you think it is appropriate to file a complaint in municipal court, though.
Well, we did not do that. So with,
So the commission just needs to finalize comments to the Board of Adjustment for their
exactly, that's all
consideration.
that's what we do.
And my suggestion on the window color choice would be to, if there's a difference of opinion, we'll have to resolve that by a vote amongst the membership to see what the opinion is. So that'd be my suggestion.
So vote amongst us as to whether they should be appropriate to the period of the building to keep it a cohesive unit with the carriage
Whatever
house.
if there, I'm just suggesting, if there's a difference of opinion among the membership, you can resolve it through a vote exercise to determine what the
Okay.
recommendation will be.
All right, so, any,
Can I ask the applicant a question?
yes.
I just want to ask, what is the material used for, it looks to be metal, is that correct? The fabrication of the windows?
They're aluminum clad, so wood interiors, black aluminum clad exteriors.
Okay.
Are they black or are they deep dark brown? They're definitely black?
Well, you can call them whatever they want, but I don't think there's any green to it.
Okay, and I thought they were black, but when we were on site, it looked as though it had a little bit of brown to it. Okay, so, look, any other questions from the commissioners or comments? So why don't we,
I just have
sure.
I have a question, a historical question. Some comments are differentiate, and others are match. How do you determine, I mean, in this case, it's very clear those weren't the original windows, so they would really differentiate between what was there before and what's there now. So I'm just, how do you balance that?
Well, if we're replacing materials, you generally match, right? If you're replacing, it almost like a Dutchman repair, right? If we're infilling brick that used to be there.
Okay, so replacement as opposed to a totally
Something
new
that's a
element.
It should be clearly distinctive.
Mhm.
So we should vote on the windows then as a,
You can process however you'd like. It sounds like, you know, you kind of went through the comments that Mr. Connolly had prepared. My suggestion would be to pull through which remain outstanding that you'd like the board to address in their final approval of the final site plan. And then I guess you can also incorporate a comment about the windows. But that would be my suggestion to kind of narrow down the comments that we talked
right,
through.
and we have, I checked off 4 that
Okay, so
on
if you'd like to read through
Mr.
those for the
Conley's-
record, we can
Right.
start there.
So, okay, we'll do the windows at the end. So, let's see, the first one is already, A's already been done. B is removing the brick infill at the Dove Coves. This is our, this is advisory. That's something that does everyone feel that No, Mr. Grimes is not. The majority, though, feel that way?
I'm indifferent.
Okay.
If you just infilled it and didn't Dutch, tooth it in there,
It's not too thick.
then it's still available. You can still see it.
Yeah. You can
It still
see it.
reads, so I have no problem with that.
And I agree, I think that you can still see it. I think when we were on site, we wanted to make it clearer and to make it actually, to understand what it was. But the fact that there is a shadow of it, I think that is fine. What do you feel?
I think it's a problem, but if we're just advisory, and he's not going to do it, I don't see what
Right.
I will speak up and say it's a problem, but
Right.
clearly it's not going to be addressed.
So
Is that, it looks like we're 3-3. How do we break that?
no, there's only 5 of you, so.
Only
No,
five of them.
3. You're in 2.
Five
You
of
think,
us.
I know, but you say it's okay.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, so it's 3-2. So we'll strike that as a condition. Okay, the brick infill below the new windows in the former carriage house openings with wood cross panels as originally proposed. Mr. Remnitz.
Yeah, I guess there were garage doors there, right? And the idea is to replicate the garage door, the semblance of the garage door that was there.
Well, not necessarily, just show a differentiation between materials, so it's easier to read. Right now, it reads as, if you look at, where's that photograph? Right, if you hold that up from a distance, it looks like that opening was always that opening, where the window is currently. But it was, in actuality, much larger. There were barn doors. With
I
wood.
guess there's a historical perspective, and then there's just me looking at it, and I look at it and say, this looks great. But so, that's, I'm going to say I'm indifferent to this.
Mr. Remo.
I feel that it looks fine, and it's a different function, and it's still, proportionally appropriate. The openings, they all seem to fit.
And I still read the opening, so I don't have a problem with this panel.
Mr. Remo.
I have no problems with it. It didn't come out the same way it says it's on the elevation, which would have been nice, but otherwise it's fine.
Okay, so we'll strike that. The next one is applicant needs to provide the lighting, which you've already said you're amenable to, and that is to come back to HPC. The fencing, which I think are we all agreed that the people that were there read that the orange lacquered is not,
That didn't seem to belong to
Right.
any time period that I could tell. Or
okay.
anything.
So you've agreed already that you would do something to change that to
As
come
long
up.
as it's not white.
Right,
Okay.
but a different paint color.
You can just make
a
it
neutral
disappear.
color.
A neutral, okay, so a neutral color.
That might have to wait, however, until the spring, just depending on. I'm not opposed to the commission's input on the color, and I think we're rapidly losing the season for outdoor painting.
Great, agreed.
It's 40 degrees and rising.
The foundation at the Georgian Inn to match the former carriage house. When I was there, do you feel that there's much of a difference between the two of them?
Again, I don't think it's worth discussing, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Okay, which leaves us, we have two things that leads us to the windows. So, out of the five of us, what would you, indifferent, you seem to like the windows as they've been put in. I think the whole argument is that this is a cohesive site and that the carriage house reflects the architecture of the inn, and the windows historically would have been a lighter color to contrast with the brick. So I think to put, and I've heard you speak that the idea of putting in the dark windows was to give it a grittier urban edge to it. So that was your intent, that was your thought, that was your intention, I think is
I didn't say that, and I'm also not commenting on this.
Oh, okay, I'm just,
I think what he said was that he wished to differentiate the buildings because each one represents a different function, and he didn't want there to be any confusion in one building.
right.
and the other
Okay, excuse
building.
me, yes, that he did, we've had other conversations, and
Oh,
that's why,
okay.
it wasn't tonight.
Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I'm sorry, I should have kept my comments to tonight, so. So will you just need to say whether or not you're okay with the way the windows are now, or whether or not you, and again, we're advisory.
Okay.
This would be a huge cost involved with this. It has to go before the zoning board.
Well, it's difficult because I wasn't involved at the initial time of the presentation when the application came forward, and so I don't know what the expectations were, if it was represented. I think you indicated on your testimony that there was never any discussion of the change of paint color one way or the other. There's nothing to establish an expectation that it was white and it was going to stay white.
Well, the commission was presented with the rendering of the proposed building that did have white windows.
So, I mean...
That's the only thing. There was nothing else in the record to indicate
Okay.
any color. There was no
Right.
testimony, there was no written record, there was no anything, and
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree, because as a visual, we thought it would remain the same.
I think
But
the question we have to ask ourselves from a legal point of view, this is the test that I would think would be the legal question, is would the application have been rejected if it had been presented originally as black? Would somebody at that time have made an issue and rejected
Yes.
the application?
Yes, I would have. When the visual came before us, both buildings had white windows.
But
Definitely.
You were on the commission at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have that picture somewhere, and I didn't,
So
somehow it
let-
didn't make
let-
it in my packet. So the question is, Mr. Greenbaum,
Yeah.
do you agree with the colors they are now, or would you, as a recommendation to be sent to the zoning board, written that the windows should be white?
Well, the question is can the aluminum surfaces be painted?
No, that's not our,
Well, no. Well, I'm just trying to consider.
well, that's
Has that-
not,
has that
that's
been
not,
explored? Okay.
that's not our,
won't be
that's not our
painted.
problem. It's not our
I'm sure it
problem.
won't be.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to decide whether you,
you decide whether we want to continue this in another forum or many other forums. We've already resolved the
no,
issue
we're
in
we're
one
just,
other
we're just an
forum.
advisory, so you
so-
just have to give us your opinion.
I can only say that the building is attractive. I understand your need for differentiation. That's interesting that you shared that with us tonight. I think ideally that I would prefer if they had been white to maintain the connection with the other building. I feel, I personally have experience in this town when the cost of forgiveness is less than the cost of permission. And so I don't think your intentions were necessarily nefarious. So I'm not going to make a big issue about them being white. I would like to say that the building could be warmed up a bit.
We're discussing the windows, so you vote for white windows? That's what I'm hearing, just say yes.
I would prefer to see them white.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Rooney?
Well, I don't really care one way or another if they're white or black. They look very good as black. I don't think we really have much to say about color. Except
Yeah, that's a question
we
I
don't,
have,
we would recommend not painting surfaces that have never been painted. And that's the only thing we can say. You can make it any color you want. You may not like it if you put in yellow windows, but black's fine.
Ms. Kane Levy?
Well, I was on a subcommittee with you, and we went to the site, and we were asked whether they should be black or white, and we did say they should be white before the windows were installed and before they were purchased. Obviously, that was disregarded. I think that's disappointing, and I think, you know, I sense a lot of hostility towards this commission at the moment.
Do you know why?
Well, let me just
Have
go
I
on.
expressed myself accurately, understandably? This commission chose municipal court.
No,
That
excuse
was
me,
not
Mrs.
this
Clarkson,
commission.
this
It has
is not this
nothing to do with
commission,
us.
and nothing to do with us. Let's not get off on a tangent, it's getting late, so you...
So
Not a tangent
what I just
for
wanted
me.
to say, this,
Okay.
that was not anything that had to do with this commission. Not one of
Right.
us reported that in any way. But I just, in the future, you're going to be doing a lot, you have been doing work on historic buildings throughout Montclair, and you do a wonderful job. But I really hope that you just are disregarding, you won't disregard in the future recommendations that come from this commission.
If you make recommendations about color, and you can't even agree among yourselves if you have the authority to comment on color, I don't know what you want me to do with that information.
Okay, this isn't getting us anywhere. So, we, as a historic commission, Historic Preservation Commission, comment on the site plan. The site, the rendering that was given to us, both buildings, the windows were white. We had nothing to do with your ongoing legal problems, nothing. We are now commenting on whether we, as a commission, are going to send, as a memorandum, advice to the zoning board.
My
So
ongoing legal problems, Ms. Bennett?
Excuse me?
You said my ongoing legal problems.
With this, excuse me, with this, with the windows.
I have no ongoing legal problems. The case was dismissed.
Okay. So, what I think we have a majority on this commission that feels that the windows should remain, should be white, which were they were on the original visual image that was given to us. That it's historically appropriate. For the architectural style, and it also gives connection to the site. I mean, that's the
So is the
reason.
recommendation to the Board of Adjustment that I restore the windows to a white color? And would you please have a roll call on this?
Okay, I think.
Is that the recommendation?
That's what we're doing now, Mr. Ploutner.
No, I'm asking you. 'cause
That's what we're doing now.
I'm trying to understand what the recommendation is.
Well, that's what we're doing now, and I think within this 5 people that are here, 3 have voted, or have expressed an opinion that they should go back to the original color, and 2 have said that they're fine with the color that you've elected to paint them,
Would you
which
please
are
have a
black.
roll call on that?
Exactly, okay.
Sure. Mr. Reimnitz?
What I'm saying,
So it's, well, I guess there should be a motion made by someone to
Okay.
recommend white windows.
So the motion is,
In a second.
a motion to send within the memorandum as an advisory role of our commission to be sent to the zoning board on the color of the windows, and that the color of the windows within that memorandum we would like to see them white. The HPC would like to see them
So we
white.
need a second on the
And
motion.
who will second that?
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Okay, and Mr. Reimnitz?
Nay.
Mr. Greenbaum?
Yes.
Ms. Kane Levy?
Before I do that, I would be interested in finding out the feasibility of painting these particular windows. Because if painting them negates the warranty or something, I don't think I would be in support of it.
Okay. So,
mean,
but is that?
theoretically, they should be white, but
Well, I
practically...
think that's what we're saying, theoretically. in theory.
Theoretically.
Right.
Yes, I think it would be the appropriate thing to do, but I'd like...
Just altered the language in the motion.
No, we didn't. Did we alter it? I
not
think,
yet.
no. I think just Ms. Kane-Levy just brought up a point, and it's theoretically, we'd like to see honestly, what the cost, or whatever the cost is, really has nothing to do with.
No, not the cost, but the feasibility of
Well, does
doing
it-
it, because these are aluminum-clad windows that are shop-finished, and I don't know what it would take to paint them white. So I think David brought up the same concern.
And I said that that wasn't our problem, that it was, in theory, we would like to, what color, would the HPC like to see the windows when, on a finished building? And this is where we need our legal expert, who's not here yet.
My issue is if it was represented to you before the windows were purchased and installed that they were going to be white, that's what ultimately informs my decision. It was an expectation that was set, and therefore it was a change, and it was a change after there was clarity in advance. So from that point of view, in order just to be completely neutral, I mean, for any application, I mean, despite the consistency of your work in town, et cetera, I think it's important not to establish a precedent that if somebody comes in to ask for any kind of variance or any kind of approval, that whatever they represent at the time of the application be adhered to consistently, because the decision was based upon the application presentation that was made. So
Mr. Goodman, I would agree with that premise. However, the community that I am in and the historical actions of the board have been that color is not in the jurisdiction. We've always acted under that impression. It's never been an issue before. The board historically has acted that way, that color is, and I can show you plenty of examples of buildings that are not mine that are approved in colors I can't believe you would have ever approved. And so for you to say that I should have known that color of a window was important, when, yes, I admit there was a rendering, but there was never a discussion of the color, never mentioned that color was important, never mentioned that there was a consistency between the two buildings that color was important. Yes, so no. If you look at the historical actions of the board, it was not about color, and there's still some dispute of whether color is an appropriate or not appropriate venue for the board. So I don't know what to tell you, but it's not in the record.
I think we should table this.
What?
I think we should table this and discuss it with our attorney.
Okay, Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
You've just come in on a discussion. We were just having a vote as to whether part of our memorandum to the zoning board would, for the windows, the color of the windows, whether they, whether we recommend that they be white, which would have been historically accurate, and keep the connection of the site and the two buildings. We're in the middle of a roll call. Ms. Kane-Levy brought up a point, which now that has to do with not cost as to what the applicant would incur, but has to do with the
Feasibility.
the
Making an existing situation worse than it is.
right
From
of
their
the
point of
windows
view.
that are already in there. So, do we go ahead with the vote, or should we table this vote and discuss it with you in more detail? And this is again, it's advisory. It's a recommendation to the zoning board, but there is a difference of opinion within the commission as to whether or not we should advise the zoning board that the colors go back to what we thought would be the color we saw on the rendering, the visual rendering, and when we did, I believe it was 2 site visits that we thought before the windows were in, and then when the windows were in, then they turned out to be black. So what would you recommend we do?
Is this the one? Okay.
Yeah.
This very rarely happens, okay? But as some of you might know, might not, I'm the prosecutor here in town.
I had a funny feeling
Um,
that was the issue.
So everything that happens in municipal court is public knowledge, so there's no secret, but this is something that Mr. Plofker and I had to deal with there. So I really have to recuse myself on this one.
Oh.
I'm sorry, so my answer would be
No,
that-
no, we're just for advice.
Yeah, so if you're asking me whether you should table it or not, so legally, you can table it or you can vote, okay? But I don't want to take any part at all, because this happens to be the one in a million where I handle something in municipal court that ends up here. It almost never happens. It's never happened yet since I've been here, and it's very, very rare. But this was the subject of something that went on in municipal court, and it's in my sole discretion to do whatever I was going to do with it.
So you can't advise, you
I
can't
really,
advise?
no.
Okay,
But I can tell you could table it,
right.
or you could vote on it, which I think the question was, initially what you presented to me was that you're in the middle of this vote. Can you table it? Sure. Or can you vote on it? Sure. But I don't want to go any further because, like I said, it's a little slippery slope because I handled something. We did it together.
If I could just make an additional recommendation, I mean, these are comments to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment is going to get a memo that contain these comments and have the list of these potentially 3 recommendations. It is going to be up to the Board of Adjustment to decide how to advance the recommendation
Right.
that you put forward to them, be it through, if there is a recommendation for replacement of the windows or painting of the windows, that's part of what their purview and their decision-making process will be, of how they take any recommendations into advisement and advance those. So, the commission has some latitude to just say, we think they should be white, and figure out what means that is, or you could, clarify your recommendation to suggest means to that end, that they should or could be white. So, you do have a degree that you can kind of play around with the wording of your recommendation to address that. So, something to think about, given the pending motion, if you want to revise the motion and do a different role. But that's just the process, that the Board of Adjustment will get those comments, they'll review them and decide how they want to incorporate them.
So then we should revise the motion.
So it's up to you what you'd like to do.
And what was your point about?
The feasibility of painting them without,
Is there anyone who could comment on that here? Mr. Connolly, or?
All I could say is I know windows are paintable. It depends on what manufacturer. I don't know exactly what windows they were installed, but I
Are they
believe the
color?
manufacturer of certain windows allows for painting of.
There's primers, there's special primers for metal.
But
I mean,
again,
all I can say is black is not appropriate for.
Well,
for
that's
this
what-
architectural
that's-
style, so
that's really what
something
this-
other than that
Right.
may work.
what this memorandum will ultimately go to the zoning board. So would you vote, what would your vote be then?
that,
What's the motion?
Wait, just, I think we need to change.
I think that we should acknowledge that what was done was not in compliance with what would have been historically appropriate and
Right.
what meets the Secretary of Interior standards, that we should suggest that it be investigated, the feasibility of painting them. However, if it would negate the warranty on the windows, then.
But I don't think that's our purview. I think it's just whether or not the color that was, that we thought it was going to be,
Well,
just
that's the issue. I think
Right.
the issue that we have to grapple with here, and I guess it's really, I believe, from a legal point of view, in terms of our role, and I'm not, has nothing to do with the application or even the issue at hand. The issue is, an application was presented, decisions were made based upon the reliance of the representations made by the applicant. If subsequent to that application decision being made, a change is made without getting permission from the body that made the original decision, that sets a very bad precedent. And so, whether it's white or black, and the historic part we can discuss, and there's a judgment call But the one issue here that is not an issue of judgment, is an issue of fact, is what was represented and what was relied upon. That's my position. And if we permit I won't say flagrant, but a specific disregard for compliance, it sets a very bad precedent, whether it's a multifamily home in another neighborhood, it could be anywhere, a sign. So unfortunately, there were if there was reliance, and I wasn't here, and there were expectations set, then it seems to me that it is our responsibility to say that it must adhere to the application. It's awkward because I wasn't here at the time of the application.
Right.
This is the principle, I
But,
believe, is the
well,
case.
we have to craft a new motion now. So, so we're going to strike the motion that motion, and we'll craft another motion, which will be to acknowledge that the current windows color is not historically appropriate, nor was it.
There was a reliance upon representations made at some point in the application process, and the question is, do we believe that one has the right to make modifications after an approval has been made?
Well, but we have to craft a motion, David. So
Okay.
the HBC acknowledges that the current window color is not historically appropriate, nor
That's inconsistent.
nor what it was represented,
At the time of the application?
nor what it was
That
represented.
requires a conclusion that the rendering was a representation. The commission had every opportunity to come up with the conditions. You did. You came up with our recommendations are this, 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 this.
Right,
That was not one of them.
because we
said-
relied upon what
There was no
given.
indication in your minutes of your meetings that you relied on it.
But we didn't know that the windows were changed until I drove by and saw they were black.
And I didn't know that it was a condition of the approval that the color had anything to do with your
Well,
approval.
this is advisory.
So just the issue, Stephen, I understand you're an attorney, and I'm not an attorney, but it just seems to me that it's an issue of, even the presumption when something is presented at the time of the application, people have to rely only upon what is presented.
Agreed, except that color has never been a presumption, either with people sitting in my seat or with the commission in my many years of dealing with the commission. Color has always been off the table. It's just never been something that the people formerly sitting in those seats thought they had the authority to have an opinion on, and it's something that people in these seats never thought you did either. So it was a surprise to me to find that this current commission thought that that was within their purview.
And I have to tell you, based upon what he just said, you have to be careful before you say that there was some type of disregard or blatant disregard or whatever, however you were couching it, based upon what he said.
I did admit that
You know?
the rendering we did submit did have white windows, and that's the only thing that I'm aware of.
Graham, in the ordinance.
We were not aware that that was a representation of the color that we intended.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Conley, is there anything from the Secretary of Interior's that they've replaced windows that we can use within our motion, that when you replace something, I understand about color, but, I mean, it's not,
Color is a tough one.
Right.
And Mr. Palfrey's right. Generally, like I said before, color is ephemeral, right? And it can be changed in the future. But I think the only thing we should say as a commission is that the current windows, the color that they currently are just not historically appropriate for the Dutch colonial revival style of the building, and that's it.
Okay.
Just keep it that simple.
Right, okay.
And then this is,
What about
like
the
I said,
issue?
we're advisory, and that's our,
What about the issue of
that's our
the
opinion.
correspondence with the other building? Is that an important issue in your mind?
In my mind, it is. Those two buildings were meant to be together, and they still are, right? They're not separated by multiple buildings. They still
So,
relate to one another.
To me,
You
there's.
have the house and you have the carriage house.
So that breaks it down to three issues. The issue seems to be historically appropriate, A. B, correspondence with the existing house, whether it's inconsistent or, does it correspond or does it not correspond? And 3, what were the expectations and were they relied upon? Those are the three issues. So how do
Well,
we
we-
draft a resolution to address that?
If I may, though, there was never any discussion about your concern about the buildings looking similar. That we were here before the commission, we were here before subcommittees, and I'm not saying it's not a valid point, it's just very late in the discussion for the commission to consider that point of view. If it didn't consider it in the years leading up to this, because we've been doing this now for several years.
But
It's late to say, yes, it's very important that the two buildings are similar because they're, I don't know how you all of a sudden introduce that concern when you didn't communicate that concern previously.
Mr. Connolly, you said that the resolution you're suggesting is that white is historically correct, and that's the extent of the
No, I
resolution?
said black. So
Black?
not necessarily white. Black, the black color that they are is not
Not historically
appropriate
correct.
for that style of architecture. And that's it.
Okay, that's
I
it.
think that's the way we should do it.
Okay.
Okay, so the current window color is not historically,
Do you want to make reference to the correspondence at all?
No, I don't think so.
no. So the current window color is not historically,
Appropriate for the Dutch colonial revival style of
Okay.
architecture of the carriage house.
okay, so the motion on the table is the current color is not historically appropriate for the Dutch colonial architecture of the carriage house.
Revival.
Dutch revival,
Dutch colonial revival.
Dutch colonial revival. Dutch colonial, the current color is not historically appropriate for the Dutch colonial revival architecture of the carriage house.
Right.
Okay.
Do you want to just say anything to the, as an advisor to the Board of Adjustment, and saying that, you know, recognizing there's a precedent here, and we have to be thoughtful about how this is adjudicated?
No,
No?
I don't think, no, we're just making a vote, a motion, and
Yeah,
we're,
so the motion is for the language that Ms. Bennett just outlined.
right,
So
the
we-
current color is not historically appropriate for the Dutch colonial revival architecture of the carriage
And we'll
house.
proceed with the roll call on this, so we need a
Right.
second.
So-
Ms. Bennett, if you'll indulge me one more second. I do have in front of me the New Jersey Office of Cultural and Environmental Services individual structure survey form for this property, which I was provided by the planning department. It refers to the building, the construction, the architect. It says style classical revival. In no way does it, in this entire two-page document, say anything about a Dutch colonial revival. And I'm not arguing, I have no idea if it is a Dutch colonial, if it is a classical. I have no idea if they're the same thing or different things. All I'm saying is that this is the first I've heard that this is a Dutch colonial revival. And so, and you could see, I have no knowledge to know that this is a Dutch colonial revival. I don't know.
Does that speak to the inn or the
It
carriage
speaks
house?
to your comment about Dutch colonial revivals, black is an appropriate color for windows. I don't know if that's the style of this. I trust that you're accurate in that, but none of the prior reports that were done references that particular style of building. It would be very clear here because
Right. So the current color is not historically appropriate for the style of the main house?
Yeah, the main house is something different, and I have not looked at the main house, but there is no mention, and I don't see anything on this survey form that says anything about the carriage house.
I thought that was the whole point, that they had to be treated similar. Now we're saying that there are two different styles?
Well, when this was written, which was 1982, there was, Dutch colonial revival is really a subset of classical revival, isn't it?
This was prepared when, 2018? So
1980.
No, that's 1982. What he's
Oh.
referring to is the
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, outbuildings were sometimes in different styles.
Wait, is there a
But-
public commentary at all on this before we get to a vote? Or when you have an application for appropriateness, do we invite public?
This is a
A
recommendation to the
recommendation,
zoning
I'm sorry,
board.
recommendation,
Just
I'm
a memo.
sorry. Do we have public comment or no?
Well, we can, but we were doing this for,
No, that's fine, do that, I'm just saying, but I'm just thinking out loud, that maybe somebody in the audience might have something to say.
can we do that now? Or should
You
we-
can.
Okay, is there public comment, public would like to speak to this? Yes, please come to the podium.
Hi, Frank Gerard Godlewski, Essex Fells. I love the story behind the carriage house and the inn design. I think that when Van Vleck designed it, he was sort of doing almost like a joke or like a spoof on the fact that the Crane farmhouse was demolished, and that was on the site. Now, the Cranes were not Dutch, they were English Puritans, but that was a Dutch-style building. Perhaps it was in existence beforehand. It was unfortunately demolished well, it was going to be demolished. I think that the inn was built first. But the carriage house is a replica of the Crane farmhouse. I think that's brilliant. And it's really like the carriage house that gives the style to the Georgian mansion, because you wouldn't really put a gambrel roof on a Georgian mansion. So, and like Evergreens across the street, the carriage house doesn't match. It's the original Doubleday farmhouse, and then they built the, the Bavarian Tudor mansion, but it doesn't really match. I think they've done an excellent job. I'd like to see this happen more in Montclair. And so I just wanted to clarify that about the style. It's sort of like a joke. It's not really following an example of Dutch architecture or Dutch revival. It was just to maintain the volume, in my opinion, of the original Dutch-looking building. And I mean, I understand the process. There's problems, whatever. There's egregious, whatever. But I actually think that, having lived in that neighborhood, I like the black. I think it looks chic and stylish, and I think that when you're repurposing a building, you can sort of do things like that. It's not like you're deleting the windows. Someday, 100 years from now, they can be white again. But I think it looks chic and wonderful, and I think they've done a wonderful job, and I'd like to see more like this in Montclair for repurposing the beautiful buildings that there are. Thank you.
Okay. So, where does that leave us now?
A vote.
So I guess you were wording the third condition. We have two conditions so far that we've decided that the commission has agreed to advance to the zoning board, which are review of final lighting fixtures shall return to the HPC, and that the fence along the rear of the Georgian Inn shall be painted or stained in a more neutral color to disappear into the base of the facade. So and then the third condition, you were discussing language, so the proposed language thus far is that the current window color is not historically appropriate for the Dutch colonial revival style, architectural style of the carriage house. So there is a pending motion to include that third condition. So we have the motion, we would just need a second, and then we'll advance to roll call if there's agreement.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
All right, then we have a
Right.
roll call.
Okay. Mr. Reimnitz?
Nay.
Mr. Greenbelt?
My issue is more the legal precedent issue, so I'll say nay from the point of view that I'm not really hung up so much on the aesthetic per se. I'm more concerned about the precedent. So on that basis, since I think it's a dangerous slippery slope when we permit changes to be made after an application has been approved, and that's what I would want to put on the record for the.
It's just a vote.
It's just a vote,
vote.
David.
Right.
Do you, that's the wording of the vote. So it's yes or no?
Nay. No.
Okay.
Ms. Kane-Levy?
I'm going to abstain at this point.
Mr. Rooney?
I'll say yes,
You say yeah?
because it changed.
And Ms. Bennett?
But it's not historically accurate. That's what we're saying.
It's not historically accurate.
Okay.
Oh, is that?
That's what I'm
Yes.
saying.
All right, I'll say
You're changing.
yes.
And I'll
say
change
yes.
mine to say it's not historically accurate.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's it.
I'm going to abstain, because I don't know enough about it.
Okay.
And based
Wait.
on...
We're going to start over. So the motion on the table is the current window color is not historically appropriate for the Dutch Revival architectural style of the carriage house. Mr. Reimnitz, your supporter?
Nay.
Nay. Mr. Greenbelt?
I'll support that, but I still want language about the issue, about the precedent.
Ms.
Make that a
Kane-Levy?
different...
I'll say yes.
Mr. Rooney?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Motion carries to include that condition, or that recommendation to the board.
Okay. So we have 3 recommendations to the
Correct.
board.
Can we have a fourth recommendation, though?
No, I understand.
No, hold on a second. I think it's very important.
It is, but that's more of a global thing?
Well, it is a global thing, but at what point do we get this message across to the Board of Adjustment?
What message?
The message is that
You
it's
really shouldn't
very
be
important when an
changing.
application is presented, that what is presented is what is built.
Just for clarity and context, I mean, the applicant is here because they filed an amendment to their prior site plan approval, so they're going back to the zoning board. And the zoning board, having seen it previously, and they approved it once, they're going back to the board for a second approval. So procedurally, they're following the process to
No,
obtain
no, I
approval for
understand
those
that.
changes. So, and the board is intimately familiar with the application. They'll weigh in as they see.
My issue is if we're going to come here on our free time and we're going to vet an application, what is the point if one can have full carte blanche after the application has been approved to do whatever they want? I'm not saying I'm not personalizing it, I'm not saying there's intent or anything else. All I'm saying is that it's an important thing to establish that when an application is presented, that we rely upon that application, there needs to be adherence and compliance to that application as it is presented. I wasn't here. All I'm saying is I want the Planning Board of Adjustment to know that this is something that we hold dear. We have to, otherwise why are we here?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and then we'll take a break. Our next up for new business is a referral from the Board of Adjustment application 2585, 20 Montclair Avenue, Ram Bahdur.
I do.
This is a bulk variance of front yard setback requirement in the R2 two-family zone district. And this is the Christopher Street Potential Historic District, which is in our master plan. So, can you raise, Mr. Angelo, do you want to say something?
Sure. Just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
We do.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are looking at this, what you propose to do to the house. It's a zone variance. You're requiring a variance of required front yard setback for principal structures of the average front yard setback of the existing buildings. The average front yard setback as calculated by the applicant is 25.73 feet. The applicant proposes a front yard setback of 24.6 feet from the proposed porch. The existing dwelling has a front yard setback of 30.56 feet. So you are requesting a variance
Correct.
from the zoning board, and you're here before us to look at your application and your design because it's in the proposed historic district.
That's right. We didn't know it at the time, but just learned it a few days ago that we are in that area, which is fine.
Okay, so we have the plans here, proposed front porch.
I'll ask a few questions. Can I ask
Well,
you,
let-
oh, you're
why
going to make
don't
a
they just-
Yes,
presentation?
may I
Sorry,
just make a
sorry.
statement first?
Yes.
We did receive Mr. Connolly's comments and question, and we are more than willing to comply with his recommendations and comments. And there are a few questions in there which I just want to answer because that might be the questions you guys may be asking. So the front porch would be built with all wood, pressure-treated wood for the outdoor. That includes the stairs and the rails, the guard rails, and well, I guess it's better if I start from the top. Okay, I guess we'll take questions and I'll answer them as we go along.
Oh, okay, so,
Oh, that's what I had to say. I'm
okay.
speaking on behalf of my father because, I mean,
Okay.
he speaks broken English and, I mean, I speak
Okay.
a little bit more fluently that you guys
We'll try to make-
comprehend
we'll try
better.
to-
sure, no, that's
Yeah.
fine. So
We'll
we
try
have
to be gentle.
Our first
Okay.
question.
Couple questions. Did you start this without a building permit?
Yes.
Okay. And this is where we're at the moment in terms of construction?
Yes, there's a.
I don't know if anybody
cease
else
and
went
desist.
by the site, but here's
Thank you.
what's going on.
I can explain and tell you what happened. What happened? My grandkids then was playing on my step on the metal rail, right? And one of them hold on the railing going and cut his hand. I went to one guys for do the railing. He want $4,000, four or five, for do it, right? So I tell my wife, I said before we got to do this, just let me take this out and put wood structure because it's so expensive to do the welding setup and even rotten. So I never know that I have to take a permit for redo the piece. When I take out the piece and I start, my wife come out and told me, he said, why don't you make it across 28 feet so we can get a porch to sit on, not just with people and come, you can't put no chairs at the front. So I said, you know, that was a good idea. Never think that we have to take out. I know I have to take a permit, but I screw up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just a question. I understand how you got there.
I admit I screw up.
Okay.
So you began this without a building
Building permit.
permit?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you planning to, when I went and looked at this, it looks like you're going to rebuild the steps as well, because
Yes.
it's forward.
Yes.
Is the proposal to build the steps the same way with bluestone top and bricks around?
No.
No.
It's going to be all wood,
Pressure-treated
pressure-treated
wood.
wood.
We can take that out.
Okay, that's not what's shown on the elevation that's presented to us?
Yes,
Okay, it's shown as brick?
yes, yes.
Oh, that's the brick
That's the
facade
original,
in the
that's-
front.
yeah.
to
That's
match
what I'm
the
asking,
back.
is the stairs
No, no,
coming
no.
down going to be
The stairs is gonna
brick?
be
No,
wood.
Wood, okay, so that's not what's being shown here.
Yes,
What's
I-
being shown here is brick,
Yes.
okay, in this
That's the
drawing.
old one, that's the original.
Okay.
one there.
Now, our
There's
architect is
another set of drawings that we should be looking at?
Our architect is in the process of redoing that particular plan because we are including a hip roof to match the upper.
It looks like you started that already, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, we
Right.
are doing a hip roof, and this rendition that you're looking at is actually what I did. And,
So you've hired an architect to...
Correct. The engineers upstairs, I guess, for the permits and all of that is going to be receiving signed seal plans from our architect.
Which will then come back to us, I guess. So are we here too early to see this? I mean, if this isn't it, why
No,
are we...
well, so this is why I think that the applicant is indicating that they've started to incorporate the changes that Mr. Connolly has requested.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
So they're just saying that they're getting a head start on that. You're seeing the plans here with Mr. Connolly's recommendations. So what the commission needs to do here tonight is take Mr. Connolly's recommendations and the existing plans and say, yes, zoning board, this is what you need to see or what the applicant should do in the final version of the plans.
Okay.
This is a residential variance application to the zoning board. So the applicant will be bound by anything the zoning board does or says.
So here's a situation where we're not really looking at anything that's accurate and making a recommendation. Whereas in the previous thing, we were looking at supposedly that was
looks like some-
accurate and...
There's been some changes.
Well,
So what do
I
we?
mean, typically, this happens frequently, where, the commission recommends changes to plans, and then it'll go over to the zoning board with the change plans for the final approval. So
Okay.
you guys are seeing the first version of the plans, you're going to recommend that they make changes. The applicant has just stated that their architect has started working on those changes, and as she started to explain, they're complying with Mr. Connolly's conditions, and in doing so, they've already started to make changes on their end in preparation for appearance at the zoning board of adjustment meeting. If there's anything beyond what Mr. Connolly has suggested, or if anything the commission doesn't necessarily agree with what Mr. Connolly
Right.
suggested, now's the time to advise them so that they can further revise their plans over at the zoning board.
Okay, so then I
Got it.
suggest then
Okay.
why don't we go through these 11 points, and then if there's
Okay.
anything that remaining, then you can ask questions. All right. So, Mr. Conley, could you walk us through?
Sure. So my first comment had to do with the foundation, right? We have a brick veneer for the foundation of the proposed porch. And my only comment there was the proposed foundation comes to a higher elevation than the water table of the existing house. So it's never a good idea to have masonry up against the wood, and they don't align. It almost looks like this porch was added. We'd like it to kind of align with the existing architecture. And typically with a porch, this feeds into my comment number 2, the porch deck should really have a wood fascia, which would help it, again, align with the water table, right? So what you see in this existing photograph of where the beam surrounds the porch, that should be clad with a wood fascia, and then it would align with the existing building.
Essentially, they're saying below the deck surface.
Should not have to
8
be.
inches or so.
Right, so bring that brick veneer down, and it would align with the foundation of the existing house.
That's no problem.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Just a question to you. What do you think about the rest of that foundation is stucco concrete? On the side, right, not in the front? Any idea about maybe wrapping that around as a surface? Would that, or we're now building a brick, before it was a brick veneer on something, now we're building a brick protrude, it's going to stick out as brick and a concrete foundation. So I'm just asking for your opinion about that.
Another material might work better.
Yeah, I think so.
simplifies it.
What?
Simplify it.
Stucco?
Or,
Yeah, I don't have the photograph that he's looking at, that's why I took that
or
photograph.
wood lattice.
Oh,
Wood
yeah.
lattice,
Wood lattice.
white wood
Yeah.
lattice would be
I
the
think that would be
preferred.
more,
I agree. That's what I wanted.
that would be,
But maybe not on a 45 though, degree, just something that's,
Straight up and down.
there you go, we just saved you a few
I
bucks.
see what
But
you're
it-
saying.
Don't buy it from Home Depot.
But it should be, we should specify it should be in cedar or some kind of wood, as opposed to like plastic.
Right.
Most likely, cedar is supposed to be over.
But no, but we should
We
make sure
should-
in the language that
right,
it's
that
specified.
it's cedar.
Cedar is usually over.
How do you say?
Yeah, all this language.
So that's at number 2?
That was, well, I don't think I discussed that.
Yeah.
No, it's not on there.
Okay, so that's in, that would be, okay, so
An
what is
additional item.
additional item?
My third comment there was the location of the porch columns seems, I mean, I would have chose a different rhythm. It's unfortunate that that one column lands in the center, or off-center of that
The front
kind of
window,
picture window there.
right.
But I don't think there's anything you can do about that now since
Yes,
it's.
because what I said, we can move it, but here what happened. There is 28 feet. And if we divide it, we get 13 and a half, we put 3 columns.
Yeah,
it's still
I understand how
within-
you arrived at
Yes,
that,
so
but
we try to, put the 4 columns.
there's always
to
more
make
than
it
one way of
equal.
doing things, so, if we, it's almost too late now, but if the 2 end columns near the doors, if they were at a different spacing.
My opinion about this is all just wood frame construction. This is easy at this point. It's all exposed and it's just sort of screwed together. I realize there's a sonotube concrete column that it's sitting on, but I think that's relatively easy to adjust if we want to make that a,
So you would be amenable to changing the
The one
space?
column?
The
So,
one column in the
you
front
know,
of the
one way
window.
of doing it is to maybe emphasize the entry, so that those 2 columns on the end could be a different spacing than the other 2, or the other
The other
the
one.
other 2 bays.
Okay. So
Maybe
you're
add 2
saying
columns
to-
at the end.
I think the basic idea is somehow the column spacing should relate to what's behind it.
Correct.
Right now it doesn't,
Okay.
okay? We'll let you come back no, we're giving some advice now, is that it, and this is it?
Well, we're going to speak to the architect and see what his recommendation is also structurally.
And you can
Right.
request that the applicant return here to show you the column spacing.
Or the
if
revisions
it's-
committee?
What about
Or
the
just revisions. Yeah, you
revisions
can always
committee?
make
Yeah, that's what the
that-
I think
revisions
that's-
committee is
I think
for.
that's a better idea. You'd get it done quicker.
So but you want to basically have language in here that the composition is congruent with the existing face of the building.
It can just be as simple as the commission requests that the applicant return to the commission for final review of the spacing of the columns on the porch.
Right,
Yes.
composition.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Spacing.
Okay.
So are you saying to keep the 4 columns but figure out a better spacing?
Yes,
Or
yeah.
just make it
What
3 columns?
what the
What
recommendation is
it?
going to be is that
Well,
so we're not going to decide that right now.
Correct.
What's going to happen is the commission's putting this comment in that says the spacing isn't right. Come back to us after you get your variance approval, and we'll
Correct.
figure out the spacing. That's what the
Okay.
condition is going to say.
Okay,
So
'cause
after
our-
you get your approval from the zoning board, you'll call me and say,
Mhm.
hey, we're ready to finalize the design of our porch. I'll call the revisions
problem
committee.
then.
They'll come out and we'll say, where should we put these columns, and we'll do it in the field.
Because you are speaking with an architect, correct?
We are,
Yeah.
however, he is in Manila on family affairs for the next 2.5 weeks. So, I mean.
So when he gets back.
When he
we
gets
can
back, we can
have
take
this
care of it,
conversation.
but it's not something that we could get taken care of within a week or two.
That's fine.
Okay.
The
And
only
be back
thing I
here.
would like to add about the column zone, their spacing, there is a relationship between the height of a column and its distance between columns are usually almost equal,
Okay.
typically.
That's interesting.
Number 4, looks like you've addressed that because what's represented in your section is not what's currently constructed, and you do have a beam between the columns. What was shown in the section was like 2 2x4s, which structurally probably wouldn't
Correct.
have
There is
worked.
a, what is that?
And it looks like you, under number 5, have decided to change the shape of the roof to a hip, which is what is on the existing house and what was on the existing porch, which seems to work with.
It looks like they framed the new
Yeah,
the
that way.
same, so they're ahead of us there.
Right.
Yeah.
And number 6?
A pilaster, that's kind of always when you, well, I shouldn't say always, but typically when you have porch columns and the entablature returns to the facade, you would have a pilaster, but I'm not sure if it would work on this, so that's kind of a, I'll leave that one up to your architect.
Okay,
I agree with that.
yeah.
That what?
No, that usually there's a return to a pilaster to reflect the column.
But it may not work with, so that's.
And the balustrades of the guardrail extend to the porch floor?
So, in the drawing, in your sectional drawing, right, you show the.
So that's actually my fault. That should be elevated
Okay.
off of the flooring.
That was just a question.
Which everyone knows, but that's just
Well-
my rendition on the computer, my oversight.
Okay.
That
I
will
have
be off
another-
of the.
Did you do this now?
I have another question about the
Yeah, I
railing.
did this. I have a knack for it. I mean, I should have went to school for it. I have a passion for it, but I never followed through. I went graphic design versus architecture.
The way the section is drawn, it looks like the railing is in front of the column.
That was my next comment.
Oh, is that the
number
next one?
9.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, so in your elevation in the section shows the placement of the railing in 2 different locations. On the section, it's in front of the column. But on your elevation, it looks like it's engaged in the column or possibly behind the column.
Okay. Well, that is going to be in between the columns, of
Okay,
course,
that-
and attached to the
That's
columns.
not what's shown in the section.
Secure.
That's all.
I drew it, and it's not architecturally 100% correct, but it's where we wanted to go. It's our vision that we envisioned at that time, but
Typically,
like
the way
we said,
porches
we
are
made a
built,
few
right? You're gonna
changes,
build it,
yeah, as-
That's what I figured. but-
Graham, another question. So you're saying this is going to be approved by variance, but before they go forth with construction, we'll be able to review all the details?
Yes.
And it's not after the fact that we're going to be looking at
Yeah,
what's
for
built?
that condition
Okay.
that we have, I mean, we
Okay.
can say column
Okay.
spacing, or, and we can expand that to say just final design.
And you understand what Mr. Conley's saying, right? Are you writing down all the?
I do.
Okay.
I do have it.
Okay.
And I am making notes on the plan.
Okay, I just want, okay.
So
So where are we, we're down to number 9?
10.
10.
You've already stated that the porch stairs were going to be wood as opposed to masonry like the existing.
That's right.
The same size, or would you make them wider? I mean,
Meaning the step width?
Yeah, typically they, on
Yes.
historic buildings, they kind of are always
A little bit bigger.
aligned with the columns but that's,
And now that they're going to be different than what's on the proposed, are you going to do a wood railing with wood balusters for that railing, or is it going to be an iron railing like what's shown?
It's going to be everything's wood.
Wood, everything's wood. Well, that's going to all go together with the wood
was
lattice,
my-
so that's going to be
Right.
good. Okay.
number 11 comment was the
No.
the railing, because it's shown 2 different ways. In the plan, it looks like a metal
Like the
railing.
metal was
yeah.
on there, yes, yes.
So,
That
it's
should
going
be
to be wood?
demolished and show like the plan.
So
Yeah.
what is the final? Is it going to be wood or metal?
Wood.
Wood,
Wood.
wood, not gonna be
Everything's
metal
gonna be
bar,
wood.
not gonna
Okay.
be metal bar.
But does that mean that the steps will come further out? Because that is an awful big,
What's that?
right
The
here.
steps are being reconstructed.
They're building that deck further out, and the steps are going to come forward of where those
Yes, one
steps
step
are
out.
now.
like
One
foot
more
out.
step.
Yeah.
One
So-
more step,
okay.
because
It's
it's come a
gonna
foot
move
out,
all-
Right.
one more step out, yes.
Okay. Any other considerations, recommendations? So we have, what do we have, 12, Graham?
Well, I guess, so it sounds like the applicant has responded to some of these. I mean, I guess it depends. There were, a lot of these from Mr. Conley were questions, so I don't know if
Okay.
they're
Yeah,
necessarily
they're
going
mainly-
to remain as conditions.
but I just noticed one other thing is what's constructed here now. It looks like you're going to have some sort of an overhang and a soffit to the porch, which projects out. Well, I guess it's what's constructed currently does not jive with your elevation.
Right.
The porch roof extends past the house, similar to what the upper roof looks like, right?
Yes, yes, it is, how many inches would you say that's? 8 inches? It's sticking out 8 inches from.
So we just need revised drawings that show.
No, of course, you're gonna have that to
accurate.
match what's there right now. With the exception, I just wanna, with the columns, just for clarification for my father, he wants to know, do you prefer 3 columns or 4 columns? That's up to the architect.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Well,
Because we don't want to like come back here and then, it's an issue or what
I
have you.
think that the way that we were talking about it was that you had a column on either side of the stair, and that one
And then you could put the
identified
other
the
2.
entry, and then you had 2 more columns. And
Okay.
it should be,
1, 2,
if
3,
that
4,
works out,
5.
it should line up through the middle of it.
1, 2, 2.
But you'll have architectural plans, well,
That's
you
how you
mean,
get symmetry.
you'll have correct,
We have an
accurate
architect.
plans, right.
You're going to have architecturally drawn from every angle, however you wish to see it. It's going to be on here, and it's going to be accurate.
Okay,
It's going to show your cedar wood lattice that you want, and it's going to address the overhang, et cetera, that you mentioned.
okay.
All of the
Okay,
things.
here's what I suggest, just in terms of column spacing to get you there faster. I don't know, we're not supposed to be designing, or, I don't know.
Suggestion.
Is,
Yes,
I
everyone
would
has.
do columns equal space on either side of the door, and then have 2 columns flanking the windows.
So you're adding a column.
So there's going to be
Adding
5
just
columns.
one at
keep
the end.
And the one at the end, of
No,
course,
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
have one at the end.
Yeah.
So
you're suggesting 5
you're saying
columns.
5 columns,
No
Five
problem, we
columns.
can do that.
right.
I see that, I know what you're talking about, yeah, we can get
Okay.
the column right
Yeah.
side
Okay.
here. Just onto the pools and yes. That could
Then
be-
you're gonna get a great view out that window. You're
Right,
not
you
gonna
don't
have
want a
anything
column in the
blocking your
center.
view.
You get to see your grandchildren.
Yes.
No,
What
no,
we
no
try to
obstructed
do,
view.
we try to divide it equally.
Right.
Yeah, I understand.
That's what
Right.
we- yeah, that's what happened.
Okay, so Graham, can you read
So
us back?
so based on the comments, it sounds like there's just, so I think it's, so the first one would be the cedar lattice in place of the brick veneer. And then the next one would be the cedar lattice should not rise above the lowest point of the building's water table. The porch deck should include the wood fascia. And then I think everything else was satisfied, and then it was just that the applicant shall return to the HPC with final design plans. of the
And
porch
that's,
addition.
so that's 5.
1, 2, 3, 4.
4, okay. Okay. All right?
That seems doable for us.
Okay,
Right,
great.
Adam?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, and
Thank
this is,
you.
just for the benefit of the board, this is scheduled, the commission, this is scheduled November 7th
At the zoning board.
Yes.
Okay. All right,
So
great.
that's why doing the plans afterwards will help them.
Okay, great.
It's coming up quick.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
It's actually gonna, I think it's gonna make the house look nicer.
I think so too. I think it's gonna fit in with all the rest of the house on the,
Nice to have a nice
on
porch.
the block, yeah.
Yeah.
And Dad and Mom will have their coffee out there now. More babysitters. Thank you.
Want to take a break?
Should we take a 5-minute break and then we'll reconvene? 5 minutes.
Whatever.
Thank you.
And if, before you toss any of the plans for the last 2 applications, I'll take them back.
Okay.
What's that?
The plans you just saw for 20 Montclair Avenue, I'll take them back if you didn't really go crazy writing on them, even if you did.
Oh, I did a
Yeah.
little bit.
Plans that they're not going to use?
Well, they're going to go to the zoning board with those plans.
Oh, okay.
So,
All
Yeah.
right, I'll give mine.
Mine I drew on, so I'm sorry.
Thank you.
thank you.
Where is it?
And also the,
Mine are somewhere.
yeah, that's
much 7 pages.
Yeah, and I emailed them to.
Okay, thank you. We're back on,
Yeah.
being live streamed on Channel 34, 10:05. And our next thing on the agenda is the discussion of, oh, should we have public comment? Is anybody here from the public that wants to get up? Okay. Sorry, I'm following the agenda. That's on it, with something that went before?
One of these days, we'll get all the boards to put their public comment, like the bylaws say in the front, but it's not a big deal. Couple of things.
Can you just give your name and address?
I'm sorry, Frank Rebecki, 398 Upper Mountain Avenue.
Thank you.
Two items are on Lackawanna Plaza. I brought this up before to you, Kathleen. Sorry. You might just, can I sit down because I'll be closer to the mic?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is this better? Okay.
Yes.
And I just want to, my understanding is that you might send further communication to the planning board as far as the referral on the Lackawanna Plaza. Is that correct?
We have a resolution that was created on September 17th.
So you are going to send a formal communication to the planning board from this meeting, is what I'm asking? Or
Another
might?
one? The intent of this meeting was to communicate with the applicant and his attorney as to what the information was on September 17th.
Well, let me just tell you what my concerns are, and you can decide what action or not you want to take. Specifically, the terminal building, the Bacon Prince building, is my area of concern. Only because there's really not been any testimony that I've followed about the changes they're making relative to that building. As many of you know from just your idea of the design, if you're looking at the building from the south, you will see basically the original L-shaped building. It's a lower level to if you're looking at it from the east. So you're looking at it across the parking lot, up the hill, so to speak. And you have the lower part of the building on the left, which forms the entrance, and then the building rises up to the peaked roof for the rest of the building. And then it goes straight down from there. It's not symmetrical in that sense. If you look at the architect's drawings, which I don't believe have changed, but I looked again at the most recent ones, and there is a indication on the drawings that there's going to be, instead of a glass storefront, there's going to take a section of the glass storefront and make it into a brick facade and cast stone, I guess, facade to mimic the rest of the terminal. And my concern is that there hasn't been any testimony, clear testimony about that. There's been no comment from the HBC on the issue. And I'm just wondering if I'm crazy, or is this something that's just flying under the radar?
Well, the architectural,
I don't quite understand. What are you talking about?
So if you're looking from the east, if you're looking from Grove Street,
yeah,
across the parking lot, you have basically an L-shaped building. That is the terminal.
Yeah.
You have so the waiting room, and then the original ticketing area was to the left, and that's really was one story, and there's a little flat roof over that. So there's a flat roof section to the left, and then the peaked roof section where the main restaurant is, that composes the view that you see. To the right of that, where there was a angled glass storefront, is now being replaced, according to the drawings, with a section that's brick, a solid brick face.
So this is the original head of the trains?
Well, the head of the trains are further back.
Okay.
I'm not on the Lackawanna Plaza side. I'm on the Lackawanna Plaza side. It looks like it's going to be glass as original.
Right.
But when you line it up and look at it from the parking lot side, there's a section that should be glass that is brick.
Okay.
And I don't profess to be an expert in reading architectural plans, but it's pretty straightforward. You see a peak roof, you see the flat roof to the left, and what should be glass storefronts to the right is now a brick facade. It doesn't run the entire length, but I think I would ask that you guys look at this again. I draw it to your attention because I want you to look at it, and if you do, I think you might want to send an additional communication challenging the planning board that this was not something, based on your comments, that was specifically addressed or pointed out to the HPC, and none of your meetings covered this issue.
No, I don't.
That would be my first point.
And what would you call that area? The ticketing?
No, the ticketing was to the left. It was, the ticketing area opened up onto the brick plaza where they have the entrance now.
Right.
It's to the opposite side, to the right,
Okay.
where there was a glass storefront. I forgot what was, I don't remember what was there, and it's changed so many
I'm
times
not
anyway.
sure.
It was
I
like
understand where you're talking about.
3 or 4 different stores.
Yeah, I think there are actually technically 6. It covers
Right.
3 sheds.
Right.
Plus the spaces in the room, and there was, depending on the configuration.
Yeah, and originally all that was completely open.
Yeah.
But what
So-
you're speaking about, what was it originally? That's
Oh,
not-
originally it was the shed extending, what happened, and I think I pointed this out to you also, is where the 2 sheds meet. You have the perpendicular shed of the receiving area for the terminal, where they used to have milk deliveries and such, and whatever bulk mail, right there. And then it wrapped around the corner, and in order to marry the 2 sheds up, they put an enclosure over the 2, where there was space between the 2, because they didn't meet. So you had the shed coming off the train station platform, and the shed coming off the terminal building, and you'll see in the old pictures, they had actually a cover to cover the area, so there was no opening. That's why, I said, it's probably one of the reasons why they came up with the idea to put the glass covers over the rest of the sheds when they did this in the 80s. They mimicked something that was already there.
Okay, so,
Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
and currently, as I pointed out to planning board, Pig and Prince is leasing that first bay of space, of retail space, for storage. They put their outdoor heaters, excess tables, chairs. It's, back of house storage for any restaurant that has both an indoor and outdoor use.
okay.
So it's something I would ask you to look at very closely, and if so, ask the planning board that it be something reviewed.
Okay. Mr. Rooney, you have that down?
The
What's your second point?
The second point is about the horse trout. I've asked, suggested to the planning board that it not be located on the plaza. I feel that the plaza is not as big as everybody, I think, thinks it's going to be. The Big and Prince is using a portion of it for patio. They have another part for plantings, and I think those plantings will be modified and changed, but they'll still be part of the plaza. And then you're going to have a bus shelter on the southeast corner. And then you're going to put a trowel in between. And my recommendation to the planning board was to move it to the corner of Grove Street and Bloomfield Avenue, where they're proposing a store sign or some kind of
Signage.
It's, one of those pillar-type signs. And there's certainly enough space. I mean, the trail is, I think it's 21 feet, if I remember correctly. It's 21 or 25, but I think it's 21. Certainly enough space, and I don't have, any objections to them utilizing it in a way that maybe helps their signage or, augments it. But I think it would present a more interesting story for people passing by the site, in the sense that it retains a certain symmetry with what the site was, in the sense that you had the horse trail, which is an accessory use that was put in the parking lot, which is another accessory use, serving a train station and the terminal building. But it was on the far side. So in this configuration, you would have the horse trail first as you're coming up Bloomfield Avenue, followed by the nod of this hat to the bus shelter and the historic shed it's supposed to represent. And then you have the terminal, which is the same sequence that you had in the original design. It would also make the streetscape more interesting in the sense that you spread out the historic elements a little bit as you come up the avenue, or coming down the avenue. It's the same symmetry going only in reverse. So I would ask that if you guys do comment to the planning board that if you find this an interesting idea worth pursuing, that you give your opinion one way or the other, and that it does get some weight, because I think you're the only body that will give the additional weight.
It also mimics what they're going to put in on the northwest corner.
It's going to be on the south.
No,
I'm sorry.
On the other corner.
On the other corner.
Glen Ridge Parkway.
The diagonal.
Yes,
diagonal line.
Kind of mimic what's.
Yes, there's symmetry there. There would be a queue, an architectural queue. You have two things on the diagonal that kind of bracket the property. And then the other thing, I won't touch that one. Okay.
What was the other one? What was
No, that's okay. I'm not
yeah.
going to go there.
not?
Another day, another time. You'll have another meeting.
Well, okay.
You'll have another meeting. The last one, if you can indulge me, I just have a question of where we are on the parking deck, as it is part of Gateway, and I thought HPC had somewhat of an oversight, participatory role on that.
Which parking? Orange?
The Orange Road deck.
I just had a meeting tonight with the supposedly the final details on what's going on there, because they had originally put in kind of instead of putting in cast stone everywhere, they said, we can't do it because we don't have the structure for it.
Yeah.
So they were going to do something with EFS, and we said, no, can't do that.
Right.
So
that's where I was last.
Yeah,
in the loop.
And so they're going to be building it up with light gauge framing and exterior grade sheetrock, concrete sheetrock wrapped in stucco.
Okay.
It's not cast stone, but it's going to look close.
Yeah, but it's not EFS either. Okay.
So I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, another.
Hi, Frank Gotlewski, Essex Fells. I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about this. This is, I wanted to make a comment or show something about Lloyd Road and
Well, you can make a comment. Yes.
Okay. When I learned that there was the idea of merging the two properties, 14 Undercliff Road and 272 Lloyd Road.
I think it's 172.
Is it 172? Okay. Yes, that's correct. I'm sorry. Anyway, I know both properties really well. One is so historic. One was Nason's son's house. It was the Nason family house. Nason is the real estate developer that developed and subdivided the south end of town. And the house is from 1865. And it there's only, I think, a few Nason houses left in the south end of Montclair. And then it was purchased in the early 1900s by Major Gracie, I'm sorry. And Miss Gracie just passed away in her 90s, Mrs. Kenny. The house is completely original inside from the 1865 design, and her father had it tutorized on the recommendation of John Nolan, who they knew very well, and that's very important in our history. John Nolan, who wrote the Nolan Plan, and said that because of the hillside condition of Montclair, it should look like an English hamlet with this Tudor architecture. So that house is very steeped in history. It would be sad to lose it. And then the other house has a beautiful interior, the Lloyd Road house as well. What my point is that I did comps to see what would happen to the rateable values if you were to remove the two historic houses and replace it with one big estate. My findings are, as a real estate professional, is that there's really no augment in the ratables. Like, there's nothing to gain by doing this. The taxes would be the same, the property value would be the same. And I compare it to 00 Highland Avenue, which is a very large 5-acre property that's new. It's a new, like, mega property, mega house that would be analogous to what is being proposed on Lloyd Road. And I see that it was for sale for $8,800,000. Now the price has dropped, and the taxes are $125 a year, and it's the same basically if you were to add the two property taxes of the two historic houses. So my point is, there's really nothing to gain, but there's a lot to lose, because you would lose two historic houses. They're very characteristic to Montclair, and that's why people come to Montclair and buy properties, because of these properties. I mean, you can do this anywhere, to do a big mega estate. So I just wanted to, would you like this?
Yes, that would be good. And that brings us, thank you. Unfortunately, the two properties he's speaking of, Mr. Glodleski's speaking about, are not registered on any historic register. They're not on any local, national, or county, state register. And because of that, there's really nothing that the
They are
HPC
identified in our historic preservation plan element.
They are identified, but which is going to bring me to another point. And I had asked Mr. Conley to look into a no knockdown law and what is currently going on in the rest of the state. And so that's something that he's got a little bit more information. That's something that we need to look to do.
Yeah, I currently, I looked at all the CLGs in the state, well, maybe not all of them. Spoke to the Historic Preservation Office, and the person who's in charge of that part of, the CLGs is on vacation till Monday, I believe. I did look at a few of the CLGs in Essex County, and I don't believe there are any that have a no knockdown law or ordinance. One that I did find was in Lambertville. They have some actually really good language about delay of demolition and how to go about. They basically put a clock on it and ask the applicant to look into economic feasibility of tearing the building down. There's also something new in the country is dismantling buildings, historic buildings, which is something we should look into as well. But I'll have some more answers for you.
Okay, good, because that's something I think that we should be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Does Glen Ridge have any?
No.
I would have thought Glen Ridge was.
But this is something that, because we haven't heard yet back from Jonathan Kenny whether our grant was accepted, correct? Or whether we're being awarded, which would then create 3 additional historic districts. So that's something we need to work on.
He's on vacation.
Yeah,
He's away.
but I think it's a question to how the monies are coming in. But that's something that for next year, I think one of our goals as the HBC should look to furthering adding historic districts. So I think this is a good entree into looking at another 2 potential historic houses that are certainly, soon to fall, going to fall, and that's something that we can possibly do about it with having some laws in place.
We did, Montclair at one time did have a no knockdown law for homes over 75 years old.
Right.
Do we have that original language?
I believe you do.
Yes, yeah, we have it. It's something that we need to investigate, not tonight, but we need to investigate as another subcommittee. Right. So I'm going to point you to that.
The only thing I will say is what I was told by the HPO is it hasn't been tested legally, this whole
Right.
delay of demolition.
Right.
So you can put it on the books,
Right.
but
Right.
will it hold?
Okay. Well, thank you. That's something that we need to look forward to. So next on the agenda is the resolution that we, meaning the HPC, crafted on September 17th at a special meeting of the HPC. And it's a referral to the planning board on the Lackawanna Plaza. It's the third resolution, application 2543. It's the third resolution that we wrote in connection with this. It's a major site plan application with variances, and we've asked Mr. Troutner, who's the attorney for Pinnacle, to come forward you're going to come.
I'm here.
Oh. Well, we invited you tonight specifically, so you might as well sit at the desk.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah. So, just wanted to, for the record, that the HBC wrote a third resolution that we sent to the planning board with additional comments, and those comments were had to do with the presentation that two of our members put together to introduce a possible alternative plan to what's currently being offered by your plan. So we're inviting additional public comment on the plan, and we hope to ratify the amended report to the planning board, which was prepared on September 17th. Do you have any questions to ask the two members that put together? Would you like to see the plan, the presentation? You've got a copy of the resolution?
So yes, I have a copy of the resolution, and if I can be permitted to ask Mr. Greenbaum and Mr. Romney, there were PowerPoint presentations that were handed to us at the conclusion of, I think, the September planning board meeting. Is that the presentation?
That was the presentation.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we have a copy. I'm happy, I mean, if the board was intending, or the commission was intending to view it, I'm certainly, I'll watch it, but I suspect I'm going to see it again.
Yeah, well, it'll be presented at the planning board. We don't know which meeting, whether it'll be at the November 5th meeting or the November 26th meeting. So, are there any other questions?
Nope.
The whole idea behind this was just to go on the record.
Yes,
and make sure that
the developer knew that we had put, and we endorsed the plan that you two had put together.
And that proper notice has been served, and that we are now, the applicant has been made aware of and has the option to comment.
Yes, I'm here.
Do you have any comment on the presentation that you wish to share?
No, not at this time.
No,
at the risk of being adversarial, we don't necessarily recognize the commission's authority to act at this on this, but we don't need to argue.
Okay.
We can agree to disagree.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you for spending 2 hours here, 3 hours.
Thank you.
Okay. So, is there further discussion?
I have a question. If one wishes to bring up new business at a meeting, that would be related to an application, what is the protocol? Graham, I'm asking, and
we should ask
Joe.
our attorney.
Joe, whoever.
What have you historically done? You talk about it before?
Typically, I mean, but if it's discussion specifically related to a specific applicant or an application, the applicant needs to be advised and given a chance to be present for the discussion.
So, like, for example, relating to the application on Lackawanna, and the applicant is here, a representative is here, can we make comments or make a resolution, a separate resolution relating to the revised plans that have been presented? So, for example, since we were granted a presentation by the applicant, there have been subsequent revisions made. So the question is, can we make comment on that as a body relating to the revisions of the application?
Isn't that
Yeah. You can make comments on it.
Okay.
at our forum tonight?
Sure.
Not, okay.
So it's not a matter of notice or anything in advance, anything on the agenda?
I mean, as an advisory body, you guys are able to just make comments.
Right.
You know, it's not approving or denying anything, you're just making
Okay.
advisory
So-
comments. My only suggestion would be that, I don't know the degree to which all the commission members are prepared to discuss that without having gone through those plans in detail.
Well-
They may not have had that benefit to review those.
What I'd like to do is at least put it out there on the record and then have a conversation, and if there's agreement, perhaps draft a new resolution, a separate resolution.
Well, that's really up to the chair who's directing the meeting.
Well, let me raise the issues, let me bring it up and ask my colleagues if this is something that they wish to get behind. One is that in the recent planning board meeting, there were assertions made by the applicant regarding the verity of Dr. Stephen Botsford's testimony, in which he stated that the historical character of the property, of the train sheds, there is no historic character. And I wish to, as a body, raise the question to each of you. I personally wish to oppose that position, and I'd like to oppose and state that the historical character, in fact, is in fact in place, and that the integrity of the train sheds as they were revised in the 1980s were respectful and considerate of the integrity of the original building, and that to dispute the position of the applicant and Dr. Botsford's testimony. So that's the first point. And I would ask that if the commission agrees, and if it's necessary, that Mr. Connolly could perhaps opine about the historical value of the train sheds as they stand today.
Well, I think first we have to answer the first question, right, which was?
Well, what I'm proposing, I guess, let me frame it this way. I'm proposing that we, as a body, oppose the applicant's position, and we state our opposition to their position, and that we offer, if necessary, Mr. Connolly to opine upon Dr. Botsford's position.
I agree 100%. I think we should. I think we should oppose any demolition. That should be our number one go-to position for any historic
But wouldn't
building
that
or
be
structure.
during the objector's part, that we write a statement as opposed to necessarily craft a resolution?
I think, I mean, it just seems to me
Well-
logic, yeah.
So.
I mean, we already said that we're against demolition.
I mean, item one of the.
But I want to
existing
specifically
memorandum
dispute
exempt
a
that.
position that was taken. As a body, we've never effectively addressed Dr. Botsford's representations, his testimony.
The building is currently listed, right? All of those structures that exist on that site are currently listed in the nomination, right? And they all stand as a cohesive whole, right? You can't
Right.
take, diminish one piece and say you still have something that remains historic, right? You change its historic value once you demolish any portion of that.
And the second point that they made was that because there were modifications made to the property by putting the glass enclosures over, that the integrity has been lost. And I would like to personally argue that they in fact were
It was
respectful.
adaptively
and it was
reused, right?
considered-
And none
yes.
of it was demolished.
Exactly, that it's
Right.
in place.
Yep.
So
I don't know of any other train station like that exists like Lackawanna does in the state.
So let me just interrupt. So David, you're bringing up these as items that you want to know if the board is behind, that they should get behind, right? Basically, so that should be, how many do you have of these, by the way?
I have 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, so why don't we make a motion on each, see if you get a second, and vote on it, and see if those are things that need to go any further. Otherwise,
Okay, no, that's
Yeah.
exactly right, as long
Yeah.
as we go through the process, so.
Kathleen, do you agree? Were you okay with him? You know, you can't stop anyone from making a motion. David will make a motion. Does everyone understand what his motion is? If you want to be more concise.
Okay,
Are we-
my
is he gonna make a motion
the
on
motion
every
is to
point?
oppose and dispute the positions put forth by the applicant in the last, in the planning board meeting, and to dispute their position and their representation, Dr. Botsford's, and to dispute Dr. Botsford's position that the building has lost its historical character.
Okay, so we have a
So,
second on that?
Oppose and dispute.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call. Mr. Reimnitz?
Yay.
Mr. Greenbaum?
Yay.
Ms. Kane Levy?
Yay.
Mr. Rooney?
Yay.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
So the second issue is the current, the application that we saw in the current application in its revised form, it is my belief that it completely disregards pedestrian safety, access, and circulation to the property. And I think that as part of what was once a pedestrian accessible historical site, people would walk there to get to the train, but the current design now will be, there's really no pedestrian circulation in the consideration in the current plan. I think it's important to raise the issue to the planning board that we feel that the issue of pedestrian access, safety, and convenience has not been properly considered.
So let's just take that last sentence, and that will be the motion.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So
We have a second?
I second that.
Okay. Mr. Reimnitz?
Yay.
Mr. Greenbaum?
Yay.
Ms. Kane Levy?
Yay.
Mr. Rooney?
No.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Okay. So the next issue I wish to bring up is I wish to dispute and oppose the representations made by the applicant regarding the column spacing in the train station as being prohibitive to a commercial success as a market. I specifically point to the fact that most supermarkets in the town of Montclair have column spacing smaller in span than the roughly 19 foot 9 inches by 40 foot span of the Lackawanna train sheds. I specifically went with a laser and measured all the supermarkets and the column spacing, and this is certainly within the bounds of, and in some cases greater, much greater than the spans of the column spacing of those supermarkets. And further, I went to Costco and measured their column spacing, which is 35 feet by 50 feet. And so, and I also wish to point out that the expert witness that was provided by the planning board, who came to the planning board, specifically said the column spacing from his professional experience in the supermarket market business is not a problem. So I wish to raise the issue, or raise a motion to dispute and oppose the representations that the column spacing would be prohibitive to a merchant establishment in the Lackawanna station. Does anyone second?
Second that.
Okay. Mr. Reimnitz?
Yay.
Mr. Greenbaum?
Yay.
Ms. Kane Levy?
Yes.
Mr. Rooney?
I've got a question is, this has nothing to do with historic preservation.
Well, it
This
has
is
to do
just-
with the
this is a
preservation of the
design
site,
issue.
but it has to do with the issue of whether or not, there's hardship. In their position, they might have to prove hardship to justify demolition. And my argument is, and to take that, if
I'm
the
gonna
planning
vote
board
no.
is going to rely upon that.
I'm going to vote no, because I don't believe that.
So
Ms.
you
Bennett?
think- Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So the next issue I wish, and it's the last issue, is, well, the issue that was brought up by the applicant about having two separate entrances to a common, two separate doors to a common entrance to the supermarket, we have established already that King Supermarket in Upper Montclair has that, and I've spoken to the manager of the store, and he says it's a great asset to the circulation of the store. He says people rave and they appreciate the convenience of being able to access it from two sides. I've since learned that ShopRite has built a new supermarket. I believe it's in Hillsdale, New Jersey, that incorporates two entrances. And that today, with supermarket designs in flux, the idea of having separate entrances for prepared food sections, pharmacies, food pickup, eat, dine-in sections, all is within the bounds of current precedent, and that there's no reason that that should create any hardship. So I'd like to raise that motion.
Just be more succinct about
So that the idea of two means of access in two different parking lots does not create a hardship or problem for a supermarket. There's established precedent, and that we believe that it would allow, from a historic point of view, it would allow for a better plan. So the question is, again, two entrances. Second.
Okay, Mr. Reimnitz?
Yay.
Mr. Greenbaum?
Yay.
Ms. Kane-Levy?
Yeah.
Mr. Bruni?
No.
Ms. Bennett?
I have to say no, because I think that is out of our purview.
Yeah.
So just, that doesn't pass. So the first three do. And
No, that one did pass. We had
I'm
three
sorry.
yeas
I
and
heard
two
it too,
noes.
so
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Three, two, yeah, okay.
And
All right.
the last thing is that even
was-
though our
That was four.
Wait, that was 4.
Oh,
That was it.
can I add one more?
Is it-
Throw me a bone.
All right, is it brief?
No, it's very quick.
All right.
Basically, the presentation that John and I had presented at the meeting in September, even though we only incorporated 7 slides of that in our actual motion, we would like to, if called upon to present it to the planning board, we would like the HPC's authorization that this presentation in its full context can be presented as the official position of the HPC.
And why are you, on what basis?
On the basis is that the presentation is much more comprehensive and more, it fills in the gaps, it gives context to the basic concepts that the exhibits that we provided, the language we provided in the resolution specifically stated, we have reviewed an alternate plan and we endorse that there is a viable alternate plan. That was the language. And then we included 7 exhibits, which was a small minority of the exhibits, and lacked any of the context and the historical storyline of what goes on, talking about Penn Station, talking about the idea of the grander circulation in town and how this is an anchor, as opposed to looking at it purely as an isolated site. So I think it's important that we look at it, it's a historic district, and we want to talk about how this fits in within the historic district. And the 7 exhibits we provided really only talk about the site. But I think as an HPC, the presentation is really talking about not just the historical site, but the historic position of that site within the greater context of the community. And so I'd like to be able to share that with the planning board under the auspices of an HPC endorsed plan.
Well, wouldn't we have to see it first to?
You saw it. We presented it at the meeting, the September 27th meeting. We presented
So that was the 30, how many images were that?
I don't know, like, whatever, 30 slides, 25 slides, something like that. It included, there was actually 2 sections of the presentation. One talking about the parking lot, which specifically made reference to the measurements of the distances from the fascia, the facade to the main thoroughfare, and how this would be a football field in depth. And also, we provided that exhibit to the planning board, but we didn't provide references of other properties to give them context. So we want to be able to show them that here's a case where here's Costco, here's Toys R Us, here's on Route 10 or Route 46. So they understand how, the point we're trying to make here is that it's completely out of context with the streetscape of Montclair. This is a super highway, big box store concept in the wrong place. But just by showing them the football field concept, it says, oh wow, it's very deep. But it doesn't give them the perspective of how inappropriate it is, how it's completely not cited correctly for that kind, So I think it's important
how inappropriate it is to the historic district.
Exactly. So all we're trying to do is talk about the pros and cons. And the basic theme is opportunity of what can be versus the consequences of what will be if this goes forward. And all we're trying to do is share this information with the planning board with the benefit of our literacy and our insight to people who might not necessarily share that same literacy and insight. So all we want to do is, John and I would like to present that on behalf of the HBC, so we have the official imprimatur of our body, so that we can really do the best job we can in informing the planning board.
Counselor, what do you think about?
Well, I just want to draw the Commission's attention to item 1 of your existing memo, which stresses that the Commission recommends the applicant explore alternatives and cites all the different alternatives that were presented both by the public at the meeting in April, and then also the alternative that was presented by Mr. Greenbaum. So it sounds like if going forward with this message, Mr. Greenbaum, you can correct the record if I'm wrong. It sounds like you're requesting that the Commission advance your plan as the favored alternative and diminish the other alternatives that were discussed in the previous memo.
No.
Just wanted to clarify.
No, but what I want to do,
you may just want to clarify that in your recommendation to the board, that you're not presenting four different alternatives.
What I would like to do is, I'm not saying that this is the plan that has to be. What we want to do is show a viable plan, and we want to show the issues, the parameters, and opportunities that should be considered in the context of their planning board's adjudication of the application. So we're not saying that this is the definitive plan. We're saying that this represents, and the issues that we talk about in the presentation represent the dimensions that need to be considered.
And my only suggestion is that you may want to consider the existing language in context of that motion, just to see if there's any conflicts between the existing recommendation that you have in your memo and this proposed one. So just something for you guys to consider.
So basically what I'd like to, then the way to phrase it is, we would like to present this as an alternative plan that explores the various dimensions of the opportunity, and more fully than what was submitted in the application, in the resolution, the 7 exhibits. We want to be able to expand and show the whole presentation to provide the context.
Now, you looked at me before, right? So this is the beauty of a collective body like this. You don't have to agree with him, right? If you think that if you don't agree and you'd like to lobby your fellow, members, why you don't, that's your time. Yeah. He has a majority in agreement with him on every point that he made. So, in fairness to him, if you don't agree, voice it, see if anyone else will agree with you, and then take it to a vote. So don't rush it. If anyone else has comments about what he says, but if he puts it to a motion and everyone agrees, then that's that's this board's position.
But are you asking for a new resolution with all these? I don't understand what you're actually.
Yeah, make sure we understand
asking.
Exactly.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is, yes, we want to add a new resolution. They've submitted, since our initial resolution, each time there have been revisions to the application. The last application had even more, greater revisions. And so we're having more and more opportunity to get a sense and to think through, and it's important that we share with the planning board our thinking. It wasn't a time, we shouldn't be limited to that one time. It's a live application. Our position at any one time is only based on the information provided up until that time, which we could still revise, but more information has been provided, and we need to respond to it.
So Kathleen, if you don't agree, you could
no, I'm worried that we're stepping really way beyond our bounds of what this commission actually is entrusted to do. I mean, you're going way beyond demolition of historic structures, and we've already included that in this resolution, and I'm really reluctant to write a resolution. I'm wondering if you could give us some insight as to the difference as an objector to go when we do the objection and go as a statement with the HVC, and maybe perhaps write a statement right before the planning board actually votes on this plan. What's the better way to go forward with this? And I'm asking you in a legal where we won't.
You could do either way, but some of your colleagues haven't said anything. Maybe invite their opinion on it.
Oh, Well,
you know?
I was looking at you for the
Yeah, no,
legal
you could do
advice.
you could do either way.
Okay.
Listen, you know my opinion, I've said this a couple of times, right? I think there's a lot of going beyond the scope of what you're supposed to do. I see a lot of that, and I had that conversation with all of you. So, in a general context, yes, remember we said you shouldn't be designing, things like that. But if the whole board feels one way, as long as you don't go so far astray, I'm okay with you taking it to a vote. But in general, there's a lot of designing here and redesigning and going beyond the purview. But if everyone's in agreement with him, which everyone was so far, then
What I want to emphasize too, that we have to look at this not just in terms of the application and the site, but we have to look at it within our role as a steward of the historic district. And this is part of a historic district. So we have to look at this in the larger picture, and we want to make sure the planning board looks at it from the larger perspective. And so much of what happens in these applications and in these hearings for the planning board is things get broken down to binary descriptions. We're talking about 24 stanchions, 14 stanchions, 18 stanchions, and people lose sight.
My problem is making this a presentation from the planning board. I think this is fine that you two do it, but I don't think that the historic preservation has any way of doing this. And I think it can get us into a lot of trouble. But can't do, if you want to do it individually, that's fine. And I don't think that changes the weight. I think that bringing in something that is contrary to what they do is actually a good thing. But I don't think it should be coming from us as the planning, as historic preservation.
This is a gray area, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't know.
I don't think it's a gray area.
All right, well, I think that it's important that the planning board gets the benefit as
That's
we.
right, and you two can do that.
Right.
Because you're just as,
Well,
you're
but
just
one of the
as strong
reasons-
as all these other people.
But one of the reasons why because the public objector process isn't done until the very end, I felt there was a certain degree of urgency to bring this information to the planning board and to the applicant earlier in the process so that constructively, assuming there was a collaborative spirit, that we could actually add value to the process and be helpful in realizing the greater opportunity for both the town and the applicant. And so because the application process is taking a very long time and it's delaying, there's a time factor, I felt it was important to get this information to the planning board where time was of the essence, and to the applicant, because I truly believe what we are proposing and the concepts that we're proposing, not the definitive plan, but the concepts and the thinking are to the advantage of the applicant. I believe that the applicant will benefit substantially by, opening their perspective and considering the greater opportunity. And I believe that ultimately they will be financially more successful.
Can I ask a question? If we did, say, have the support of the HPC to make this presentation, it would happen at the end anyway, right?
Completely.
So the fact that we would come up as objectors 2 seconds later.
It comes at the very end because
the time thing makes no difference.
The applicant has not finished his presentation yet. We've been going on this for 6-8 months.
So getting the HPC.
Haven't we already supported this in the resolution?
Right.
We did already. We went through
Right, but
this.
the actual presentation to be made to the planning board, okay, has not been done. We have not presented this to the planning board,
And you're only going to get it at the end, because the developer has not finished his presentation.
And I agree, and that's, I guess, John Wynn, the chairperson's process, he's chosen to make any objection and public statements at the end. My only concern, from the benefit of the applicant's economics and the benefit of the township, so that nobody points to us as a source of delay, because we are not looking to be delay, we're looking to help the process along. It seems to me to everybody's advantage to get the information out sooner rather than later.
You're not going to get it out sooner. It's going to come at the end.
Okay, well, I mean, ultimately, it's a, you know, there's legal issues here that I'm not particularly fluent in, so I'll defer to others. But I do think these other points of the resolution should be made.
So basically, you want to be able to go before the board and say that you're appearing on behalf of the HPC, right? That's the boiled down nutshell,
It's
right?
not as critical.
No.
I think
What is
probably
it?
we have the general support.
Right.
Trying to make something better.
Right.
I think what David was saying, we thought by getting the HPC support,
Right.
it would move us ahead of the line and into the process, into the pipeline sooner. Because as these things happen, I can see what happens already with these applications. You just get worn down and worn down, worn down to a point where you just throw in, there is no other alternative. There is nothing else
Right.
to be considered. So that was our objective.
All right, so maybe I can help you with this, and Graham can jump in. There's no vehicle in which this board has some type of preference at a planning or zoning board meeting, right? And you can't turn it into that legally. So that's why you just can't. You
That's
can't.
what we were trying to do.
Right, you can't really jump the line because, well, we're the HPC and our town ordinance says HPC is a collective body, you know, has a right to be heard first, or you have to take me now as opposed to then. So, but I think what you were looking for was generally to go there, not as just an objector, but as a, and say, well, this is the board's collective position.
Well,
Right?
I think just to augment Mr. Angelo's statement, the commission does have the benefit of a little bit of advanced material providing, in the fact that they were able to transmit the September 17th memo, to which 7 slides of Mr. Greenbaum's presentation were attached as Appendix F. So, and John, sorry. So, I mean, the commission itself already does kind of have the benefit of getting an advanced ability to notify the planning board of issues and provide that correspondence.
I'm just having a hard time understanding.
The format of which it is delivered, varies.
Right.
It comes in a written format
Right.
with such attachments. But that information was communicated and provided to the planning board in advance of full public comment.
Right, and for some reason, we edited it down to 7 pages. I'm not quite sure what the thinking was at the time, but I do think that there needs to be, again, context, and all I want to get across is that the sooner this information gets out to the applicant, and the sooner it gets to the planning board, it can shape the direction of things, and ideally move it in a more positive direction.
Well, a copy of this report with the updated appendices has already been provided to the planning board.
The seven.
Correct.
Yeah, well, I think that when you do present, you should do the full presentation. That's my opinion, and
Okay.
I don't think anything that's been submitted, the shortened version wouldn't prevent that from happening, would it?
Well, I mean, I think that, there was some discussion about the format of Mr. Greenbaum and Mr. Reimnitz's presentation. If they present at the end, they can present, their full presentation. It's whatever they'd like to
Often
present
happens
at the
that
end.
People come with additional information in the middle of that.
So are you asking for endorsement for the full presentation? Is that what you're asking for now?
Well, what I was looking for is the full endorsement regardless. I think it's important that the 7 exhibits are only a small portion. There was just the kernel of the ideas that were presented in the presentation, and it would be helpful for the HBC to endorse the entire presentation just because it presents it all in context. So it wouldn't hurt to have the HBC's endorsement. I'll do it either way in terms of when I make the presentation, when we make the presentation. But I do think, going back to those other points that we raised and we had votes on, those need to be on the record and passed on to the planning board about the opposition to those various points that I made earlier. Now, if anyone does anyone have an issue with the presentation being from the HPC? We'll do it either way.
So you're asked, okay, I'm confused because I thought that the presentation you were doing was endorsed by the HPC.
Okay, so
it's this.
Yes.
Right.
No.
That's what was sent to the
Right,
planning
that's what
board.
was sent, but did that incorporate, that's only a subsection of the presentation. The question is the whole, I want to make sure there's clarity. Does the whole presentation represent the position of the HBC?
Yes. I mean, it just further elucidates
Right,
the
the
message
the
that's being
message that-
delivered and
right.
to expand on it
Well,
is
and-
completely in keeping with what we endorsed.
And just to further note, I mean, the existing memo that was transmitted to the board says, additionally, the commission considered an alternative design concept at their special meeting held on September 17th, 2018. That a full video recording of the record of that presentation is available on, for the HPC meeting, at which you showed the entire presentation to the commission. And then the statement continues, and the HPC endorsed as a viable alternative plan which demonstrates that demolition is not necessary.
Okay, so then,
So the statement, I think, is already here that that the commission has endorsed it as a viable
okay,
alternative.
so because there was some question, I believe, from the planning board, whether or not the entire presentation was in fact endorsed by the planning board, by the HPC. So then that's our position, that if John Wynn has the discretion to, when he feels it's appropriate for us to present, he understands that this represents the position of the HPC.
Yes, but Mr. Wynn, as the chairperson...
No, it's his discretion, it's
Right.
totally at his discretion, I understand.
Right.
So we don't really need a vote on that then?
No,
Right.
because it's
Okay,
already
so
in the,
that's-
it's already in
But
the
the other three are-
resolution.
The other, four are the doors, the column spacing, the pedestrian safety and convenience access, and then the position that the train station is not historical based on Stephen Botsford's testimony.
So procedurally, just to clarify, so would you like these 4 additional items added to the September 17th memo? Is this now a separate memorandum that's going to
This
be
is where I need to
issued?
defer, I mean, I would
Right,
defer
and
to
I
you.
don't,
Well, you could do whatever you like. Would you agree? You could do whatever you like.
It's up to you guys.
Why don't we do
It
it,
just becomes a memorandum that goes to them, right?
yeah, amendment,
It's on
why
record.
don't we do it as a separate one? Just because it's an...
I don't want to make you vote on that, but
Well,
if
no,
you
I
agree, then...
I would say, I would do it as a second one and base it upon in response to the revised plans that have been presented.
but
We haven't gotten the
we haven't
revised
gotten them.
plans
They
yet.
haven't presented
presented
those.
it.
At the planning board they have.
No,
No,
they
they
didn't.
haven't.
They're going to do it on November 5th.
Oh, but they presented revised plans at the last meeting the other day.
They didn't present them.
They didn't present the
Not the
architectural
architectural
plans.
Well, they sent them out.
They didn't present them.
Oh.
So then you need to decide now how you want to handle this.
However
Add
you
it,
guys want to
you
do
wanna-
it. I think it's more effective to have it separate, just because it's another document, but if you want to add it to the same, 6.5 dozen of the other. So it's more about impact and effect.
Well, I don't know if it's going to have quite an impact. I mean, I think your
Gonna be an
presentation will have
annoyance.
the impact, but I don't
But
know.
these positions are important for the planning board to understand that we as a body recognize that these positions we're in opposition to these various positions. Because those are not raised in our resolution. We don't make the issue about the column spacing. We don't make the issue about Dr. Botsford's representation. That position of Dr. Botsford's testimony is critical in this case, because the question of whether or not this is historical or has lost its historical character based on the representations of the applicant could bear a legal issue. The question is, if they can argue that it's not historical, which is what they're trying to do, then it makes it more challenging to preserve it.
Were you there at the meeting when he presented?
Dr. Botsford?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Did you object to it? Did you go up and ask him questions?
I
That's
believe
your chance.
I did, and I think many other people did.
Yeah, that's your chance.
Well, I did.
Yeah.
I did, and I pointed out that the columns that he said were not historical were in fact descendants of the columns. I forgot what they're
Stanchions.
no, but what was the name of them? And I got it from a book that Mr. Conley had given me, and the descendants of them are called butterfly columns. So that's something I don't necessarily think needs to be in a resolution. That's information, and that's the one thing that is actually, within our purview to make an argument against that. But I think that
we should.
But it's made.
No, but I don't know. I mean, this last meeting I attended of the planning board, the applicant was very emphatic to get on the record, was very specific to get on the record language about Dr. Bodford's testimony, and I think it's important that we verbally dispute this.
All right, so let's just streamline this then. So I think David's position is that he would like to do a separate memo, right?
Yes.
An additional memo to memorialize the additional things we voted on and agreed to tonight. So I think that should be the motion. Now, if that doesn't pass, then it would just be talking points. Do we agree? When he goes? Right, what will be the alternative? If it's not a separate, or do we want to say then it gets added to this existing? How do we want to do it? So you could just
I move that
put an
we
end to it.
create a separate memorandum to memorialize those talking points.
I second that.
Kathleen, if you want to invite comments from your fellow,
Well, but
Yes.
it's already been,
before you vote on it.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
Any comments?
I can't vote on this last one because I wasn't there. That's an abstain. I think that we were becoming a laughingstock at the planning board because every other week we have another resolution on the same thing. And they're having a tendency to roll their eyes.
I don't agree with that.
They are, believe me.
Well, I think then
So-
then they're,
Well, but Dave, that's his opinion, so.
Yeah, it's
Right
your
now,
opinion.
Let's listen, because that'll impact the vote that you take now.
I wouldn't do anything special. What I would do is at the very end, when we have open comment, this is when you bring all this stuff together.
And I think at that point, we have your 3 points, because I think one really goes outside our purview, is our comment at the end. But I think that you and John going up and doing the presentation, you touch on the points of the stanchions, and what was the third one?
well, we talked to
And the circulation, that's all within your presentation.
So then I would just say, what would be Caroline's, if she has anything to say, if you have a thought on it before we vote.
I think it's important. I just
Well,
want to
but
say
let's
last
leave it with
point.
Caroline.
Okay.
If she has anything, do you have anything to say?
Well, I think they're all important points. I don't, if they're already contained in our resolution, is it not necessary to bring them up again?
But
or-
they're not contained in our resolution.
All right.
Well, the
That's-
resolution points to your presentation.
Right, no, but this is separate from our presentation. These are specific points that we're raising that are specific, opposed, dispute. These are specific rebuttals of representations made by the applicant. And we want to make it clear that the HBC opposes those positions. We dispute them.
All right.
It's very
I think
important.
we know David's position. I think what we should do now is vote on it. Everybody got an opportunity to weigh in. John didn't, but I'm guessing by a second, we know what he thinks. So, John, you have anything else to say in regard to?
All this is, I'm surprised you say the laughing stock, and when I hear, I understand, that's fine, I believe it, and I believe what the planning board thinks about what we do. I get that, and we act that way too. We sort of roll over on something that I think is very important. And if it's going to be a laughing stock, that's fine, I'll be a laughing stock. But once this thing gets torn down, it gets torn down. And I don't know what we're doing here if we're not trying our best to make it happen. That's how I feel
You just
about
can't go back to the well all the time. You make your statement.
Okay.
And
I think
now it
that-
changes. It
I think
changes.
that's fair
Okay.
enough. I think we have a vote, we have a
There's a
motion by
second.
David and a second by John.
Okay, Mr. Reimnitz?
This
You
is
wanna
to
say
write, wait, just
This
to
is
be
to
clear.
craft a second memo.
A second,
To craft a
Just a
second
motion
memo.
on the table.
And
But
if you
w-
don't all agree, if there's no majority, it's not going to happen.
right, but there
Okay.
were other alternatives that we actually, okay, got it.
Right?
Okay. Mr. Reimnitz?
Yay.
Mr. Greenbaum?
Yay.
Ms. Kane-Levy?
Yay.
Mr. Rooney?
No.
Ms. Bennett?
I have to say no.
So these additional points will come in a second memo, I guess, that will be transmitted to the planning board on November 5th.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
But how many, so are there the 4 points or the 3 points?
It is...
Why don't you read them out loud so we can make sure that.
And it's in the form of a resolution, or is it another way to?
It'll be a memorandum, similar to this
memorandum.
document. It'll be
Okay.
a whole nother one that we do.
I had 4.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
oppose and dispute the testimony presented by Dr. Stephen Bedford, that the applicant has disregarded access and pedestrian safety, the dispute and oppose the representations regarding the column spacing, and that 2 entrances to the common supermarket are a viable option.
Did you get the pedestrian
Mhm. Yeah.
access? Okay.
But there are other things we could do. We could ask Mr. Conley to make a statement, or make a statement as our historic...
To dispute.
Pardon me?
I'd be glad to write something to dispute it again.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Well, it'd be...
Or if you wanted to draft something, I'll look it over and add to it.
Well, I mean, the question is Dr. Botsford provided testimony where he indicated made a variety of statements, most critically that arguing that the train sheds were not historic. And if they were historic, they've lost their historic character.
No, you understand it, right.
A memo, I'll look at it.
Okay.
Well, I think, so we can't, the only issue is that we have to craft, whatever's going to go into that memo has to be done here in the public forum. We can't write the memo, we can't close the meeting, write the memo with all kinds of new content, and then send it to the planning board. The content of which needs to be decided now, and it was those 4 points that we just talked about.
Can we ask then that the HBC wishes to have Mr. Connolly speak on behalf of the HBC as to the historical, the actual status of the historical qualities of the train shed?
Well, wouldn't that be at the objector's point as our expert?
That's up to the commission.
When you say objector, I can think that's public objector, but doesn't
What do you mean?
We have to establish...
The course of testimony is set by the chair
Right.
and the applicant. So as they proceed through, they'll invite questioning of the witnesses that do testify, and that during that portion of the meeting. Any additional commentary has to be at the discretion of the chair for him to open that up and ask. So the commission can certainly make the request of the planning board to have Mr. Connolly address them.
I think that would be great.
But it's totally up to their discretion as to whether they agree to do that or not.
I think that would be great. We should ask the planning board to listen to our expert advisor to speak about the historic qualities of the building. And specifically addressing Dr. Bedford's, whatever his name is, his testimony, to dispute it. That's it. Nothing more. Just to dispute his points, expert to expert.
I think that would be a
Well,
great
so I
idea.
guess there probably should be a discussion and a motion and a
Right.
vote again on that item to make it a 5th item, I guess.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, so do we have a motion to invite Mr. Conley to write an opinion about Dr. Bedford's report?
Make a motion.
I'll second that.
And appear?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
appear, yes.
Yes, to appear.
Right. Okay, so the motion by Mr. Rooney, seconded by Caroline.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Any other further business for tonight? No. Okay, it's 11:15. Officially over. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.